health metrics, and that's important. We have to get transmissions down. And so we are going to be making sure that indoor activities are more curtailed. Please remember that indoor activities do include private home gatherings. And I have to advise, I've gotten a lot of questions from constituents. If you see something, it is probably the most appropriate thing to do is to report that to 531-2000, the non-emergency line. Our police officers can inspect, and if they find the violation, they can enforce the public health order. And I've been in consult with the county, and that's what they're asking us to do, to be able to resolve any issues of unlawful gatherings and certainly those that present risky transmission. We have got to get our transmissions down, and of course that's going to be allow us to not see more hospitalizations go up, but rather see more community activity start to be restored over time. We encourage everyone to wear a mask. I know that that is controversial, and it shouldn't be, because it is so clear what it can do to be able to reduce transmissions, and that's going to have a long-lasting, better economic impact if we all just recognize that, drop the politics, and do our part. So please be kind and generous to each other. This is a stressful time, but we really do need to make sure the best guidance is out there, and I continue to do that both personally as a neighbor, but also as your council member, and remind everybody of these core facts. But we've been impacted so much as a community on the issue of restaurants and other local community businesses. Today, the mayor issued an executive order that's going to be able to allow for additional expansion of restaurant activity into the sidewalk and into neighboring parking lots. Normally, that's covered by a little bit of a review process and a slight fee, and much of that has been waived. Of course, a lot of our District 3 businesses, including those here in Uptown, already have sidewalk dining, and the rest of the sidewalk is pretty limited. You have to retain some, of course, for sidewalk use and ADA access. So we are looking forward, hopefully next Tuesday, to an ordinance coming forward that will allow an expansion into the parking lane for individual businesses that choose to use that space. And it would also, again, reduce fees, reduce time, and would have needed protections there to keep that space safe for patrons, but allow for more outdoor activity as well, so we can keep our businesses weathering through these very difficult times. We've extended an eviction moratorium crisis. This is a stopgap, of course, because we are still working on the burden of rent and mortgage and everything else in the entire cycle. And there are multiple solutions at the local, state, and federal levels that are all sort of happening right now. But the last thing that we want to see is anybody who is impacted by COVID and due to loss of income become homeless. And so we, on that note, an effort I've been working really hard on over the last 6 weeks was to really use some of the federal CARES Act dollars that we received a few months ago to be able to apply that directly to community members, particularly those low income that are hurt the most. And so we got an emergency rental assistance program up and running. I aimed big. I wanted to get a quarter of our total allotment. After budget negotiations and other conversations, we were able to get a first sort of seed funding of $15 million. I'm going to continue to look for state and federal support and additional even private philanthropy that can help to augment that. We think that will help at least 3,500 families in the San Diego region who are at risk of homelessness not become homeless because they lost their job and they're seeking employment and they're trying to get income back. I mentioned small business relief in the form of additional activity, but of course, not just restaurants, but others have been direly impacted. So we have also put some of that federal CARES Act money into a city small business relief fund with the budget allocation that was passed last month. That is now up to $18 million. We know the demand is so strong. The first tranche that went out was only able to fund about 800 recipients citywide out of more than 10,000 applicants that were received. So we'll continue to be able to get that out the door as much as we're able to receive that assistance from state and federal resources. I think you all are following the work on homelessness. The convention center continues to be wildly successful from a public health standpoint. We've had very low infection rates, and that is important because we don't want the vulnerable population to succumb to disease and spread. And out of the sort of 1,300 individuals, we've been able to get an additional 600 off of city streets. And already as of a week ago, I should get updated numbers soon, but we've had over 240 placed into housing. And we're really turning the emphasis on that facility to be housing oriented. Now that everybody is in the system, stabilized, receiving public health care, receiving social services, we want to make sure that they're connected to housing specialists. So that's our key focus throughout the summer, is to make sure that we're exiting so many people, opening more beds and getting more in, as long as that facility is available for homeless related programs and assistance. Of course, we just completed the SDSU land sale down in Mission Valley. That was a lot of careful study to be able to get that action done late last week, actually. We've got several ballot measures that council is debating right now. Today, we move forward a unanimously review of an update to the Commission on Police Practices. And I think many of you are following a lot of the issues out there with police and community relations and the benefit that this would provide for additional transparency and independent oversight, so we can make sure as a community that we're feeling good about actions that are taken. I am moving forward. I'm trying to get forward, and I'll be asking my council colleagues next week to place a $900 million housing bond. These have been very successful local matches for state and other resources that San Diego is currently missing out on. That actually will graduate over 7 years before the full $900 million is released, and we'll be putting out more information there. It so far has only gotten out of the Rules Committee on a 3-2 vote, and I need to get 6 votes on the City Council. So we'll see how that vote shakes out next week at the full City Council. We also have one that's going to be able to help us protect state infrastructure dollars. Right now, because of a measure passed in 2012, that was Proposition A, it forbids us from entering into certain types of contracting that is now in conflict with state law, and things like pure water and other major infrastructure problems are absolutely at risk. And San Diego, City of San Diego could just absolutely be out of opportunity for infrastructure dollars. We don't want that, so I'm working with a lot of stakeholders to try and craft a measure that will repeal and replace that language, so we'll continue to qualify for state assistance. There's so much happening in Uptown. Sandag, I know that this has been a long time coming and a lot of conversation here at Uptown Planners, but the 4th and 5th Avenue bike lanes are supposed to begin this month and should be completed sometime late next year. We've got, Sandag has got construction notices and community outreach out to 5,300 nearby residents, and they're going to be expecting the contractor to begin that construction within the next few weeks. So I know that's been a long time coming, but I think we're just on the cusp of that. I want to thank Michael Prince and the planning department for all their hard work on Plan Hillcrest. I know this is very iterative, and we've got a lot of conversation, including tonight, ahead of us, but beginning that discussion, improving our public spaces, promoting transit opportunities, and providing homage and celebrating our LGBTQ history, I think, are really central tenets of that. I'm really looking forward to how this proceeds and its outcome. We've got, trying to think, Normal Street Promenade, big community project as well, wrapping up final design, meeting with city staff on some other issues to resolve, but we're planning to submit that to permitting to DSD in July. And we're estimating about 12 months after that. So construction would probably begin in the winter of 2021. The post office in Hillcrest, although I know that's federal property, we get a lot of input about what they did with the landscape in there. We understand that they are about to restore that in front of the building, and so we're pushing for more trees, and other concerned residents, of course, can reach out to Congresswoman Susan Davis's office, probably a better liaison to the site managers there as well. Finally, I want to wish you all a happy Pride Month. Today we issued our annual proclamation honoring Pride organization and, of course, all the things that we celebrate as a diverse community. It's important to me personally. I know it's important to the Uptown community, and although we can't be together physically for the city's largest civic event, understandably so, I know San Diego Pride is promoting a lot of activities this month online to be able to make sure that we are capturing the moment and some of the times that we're in right now, and being able to both acknowledge those and continue the spirit of Pride moving forward until such a time that we can come together in person. I think we're all together in spirit. So thank you for this brief and comprehensive update. Happy for a few questions, and it's really good to see you all tonight.
Thank you, Councilmember. Zach, do we have any public comments?
Lou Railing, I wasn't certain, you may have a question there. I'm going to allow you to talk right now. Lou, are you there?
I'm here. Thank you very much.
Sure.
I did have a question, but my view is different in this meeting, and my privileges. Is that different for everybody? Is that a different setup for the meeting this time? I'm sorry to interrupt with this.
That is correct. No problem. We're in a webinar format. We felt this would be easier overall and better technically speaking. So yes, it is different from this meeting.
Okay, I just wanted to mention that Sohail said to send a chat message to you directly if we wanted to speak. That's not an option in this format.
Yeah, feel free to use the raise your hand function or just send a chat at large.
Okay, can do. Thank you very much. My
Thank
question
you.
was about common communities. If you could talk about that.
The complete communities. Thank you.
Communities.
So the mayor has put forward some work effort that our planning department, I think, has been undertaking for some time. I know they've been probably over the last 12 months looking at trying to look at some more master policy about how to integrate housing policy and transportation options and infrastructure support. And as a planning group, I think you all know well, these all obviously interconnect strongly. And some of the challenges that as some of these reforms are coming forward, we had a very robust discussion at my land use and housing committee last a couple weeks ago. As they're coming forward, of course, some council members or some members of the community like this and don't like that. And there's for many, I think, very first time conversation or first time awareness of what some of this may do. It's another option in lieu of other programs or other bonuses or other things that I think are already on the books. We think that it would be able to help two things primarily. One is infill development and actually has additional inclusionary affordable housing requirements on top of the base 10%. But it also adds additional infrastructure dollars. We are challenged as an urban and an older community, and many of our disadvantaged communities to the south of us are also lacking a lot of the infrastructure dollars and never seem to pull together projects. So what some of my colleagues in more suburban and even up to the far north, their districts are a little miffed about is a fee that is going to be assigned to new development out there that's meant to really try to redirect alternative transportation and other community enhancements in historically disadvantaged communities and more urban communities. That could be a net win for District 3. But we've got, I think, a lot in play right now. The Voice of San Diego had an excellent write-up about that today that I think underscored exactly all that's kind of on the map right now. And I'll just sort of end by saying they hit the nail on the head that there was a lot of feedback and comment provided to city staff if they're going to bring forward something to city council, really try to figure out how to address a very wide range of issues. I was strong and I wanted to make sure, although this had one review at CPC, that they get out there and really try to educate a lot of our community planning groups. I've heard specifically from Ocean Beach, Kental, and North Park and Southeastern, but if Uptown wanted to receive that, I'm sure you definitely are due and would appreciate an update as well about exactly what this other option is. I encourage them to do so. So check out that article. There's a lot to absorb, and I don't know if or when this comes forward, but we will stay in touch. So if there's more public discussion around that, you can definitely be in the mix for that. Thank you, Lou.
Thank you so much, Councilmember. Zach, anybody else?
Sharon, you have your hand up. I've just unmuted you. Do you have a question? Give you 3, 2, 1. Sharon. All right, going to, let's see, ask to unmute. Not working. So I have a question from Gail. Gail wasn't able to unmute, but asking for an update on the promenade, Hillcrest Promenade.
Sure. So that I just mentioned briefly in my remarks, in addition to so much else, but it probably was missed. So Gail, that is wrapping up, I think, final design right now. And we are going to be submitting it to permitting and DSD. That will take about 12 months to go back and forth, and we expect construction to begin sometime in the winter or early springtime.
Great, thank you. Anyone else, Zach?
No one else.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Councilmember Ward.
Well, thank you, everybody. Stay safe and healthy. I know you have a busy agenda, and thank you for the work that you do.
Appreciate your time.
Yes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to action items. Again, as mentioned earlier, If there's a specific action item here that you would like to comment on, please send a message to Zach and he will make sure he notifies me when it's time for public comment. After public comment, we'll move to board comment. This first action item, I am actually going to be the presenter of this item. So I'll give you a little background, full disclosure here. This is for a street vacation that I'm processing for neighbors of mine in the kind of South Mission Hills neighborhood of San Diego. This portion of Torrance right-of-way. Michael, do you think you could do a share screen on this for us?
Yeah, I'm working on pulling it up, and then I'm assuming you're recusing yourself from this item.
I am recusing myself, but I mean I can't even vote anyway, so I'm just presenting.
Wanted to make that clarification. So,
Yeah.
yeah, give me 1 second to pull up the item, please. So.
There we go. So this sliver of land, it's wedged between 3 parcels of property that are owned by 3 private property owners, labeled Parcel 1, Parcel 3, and Parcel E. That diagonal hatched area that you look at there is the area that we're proposing to have vacated. Perpendicular to that is Curlew Street. And then this is one of our typical kind of canyon paper streets that cuts through a section of the city. It goes up a very steep slope. My personal property is to the left of this vacated area, and we're proposing to get this section vacated. Once vacated, the 3 property owners that are fronting this section will be entitled to their frontage of this vacated section. And typically the way it works is they would each get up to the center line of the portion that their property abuts this vacated section of the street. So this is the first step of this process. They need to come before Uptown to get us to review this project. And then after they go through our process, it goes all the way up through to council approval for this vacation. So I will, now I'm done with my presentation. I'm going to put my chair hat back on. Zach, do we have any public comments for this specific project?
Not on this item.
Okay. Are there any board members that have questions on this specific project? No board members?
There is one member of the public who's raised their hand that I see here, Suhail.
Okay, Zach, can you let...
Yeah, well, I have a question here. Is there a cost to the neighboring parcel owners from Mary Brown?
Is there a cost?
That
No.
is what the question says. Maybe we will let Mary. And then Dennis has a question, but we can, Dennis, we can get to that when there's board comment.
Sure.
Let me see if I can.
Let me address Mary's question. So there is no cost for acquiring the paper street. Basically what happens is once it becomes part of these adjacent property owners' parcels, they will now be paying the additional taxes for that additional land that they've now acquired from this vacation. Any other questions? Clint has a question. Clint, do you want to unmute yourself? Zach, can you unmute Clint, please?
Clint should be able to unmute himself. Just one moment.
I got it. Go ahead, Clint.
Oh, thanks. So I was just going to say, just to follow on to Michael Prince's point, maybe just for the sake of being clean about all this, can we have Michael Brennan accept the motion that may come as this item, just so that we don't have the chair and the presenter doing the same duty for full recusal? No offense, Sohail, but just to be clean.
That's a very good point. So yeah, Michael, why don't you take over and handle this specific action item?
It looks like Deborah Quillen asked what is on that property right now. Anything
It's
at all?
the only thing on the property right now is just city infrastructure, and all that remains, and they retain easements through that section of proposed vacated land. So none of those existing infrastructure elements will be able to be removed, as they will be as they'll need to remain.
Then Dennis, you want to unmute yourself? Are you able to?
Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, thank you, Zach. Sohail, just I guess a comment before the question, and I'll be honest with you, the fact that there would be a conflict of interest here, to me, is so evident that I would have thought, as the chairman of the Uptown Planners, you would refrain from using the position to make any presentation. But my general question is two-part. One is, what is the benefit of the vacation? And I'm assuming if you're presenting this, there is a benefit. And the second part is, what percent of that benefit is going to accrue to the 3 adjoining properties?
The benefit for this vacation is solely for those 3 parcels. This is, it's kind of an unused section of land. One of the reasons that they want to do the vacation is for like security purposes, so that they can actually fence off this area and prevent people from actually accessing through this canyon and going up the hill to the other portion of the street at the top of the hill. So that's the main purpose here.
But when you say they, would the other adjacent owners have not been better to present the case and be totally neutral, where you wouldn't have to recuse yourself?
Yeah, they had asked me to handle this this whole process. I mean, I'm going to recuse myself from this, and Michael can handle the rest of the formalities of this. I'll be the presenter for this project. This is my business, my industry, and I do development, design, build projects all over this town. I'm not asking for any favors here. I'm showing you a presentation of a simple street vacation. I'm not looking for any favoritism. You can.
To be honest, as I say, as the chairperson of the board that is reviewing this, I would have hoped that another adjacent owner might make the case. In my personal view, there seems to be a conflict, but it'll be up to the board to vote.
Sure. Michael, can you please take over and respond to these comments, please?
Yeah, I think I'm unmuted at this point. So I'll take over as our chair, if you will, vice chair for this item. That way Sohail can be completely recused from this part of the process. So if there's any additional comments, go ahead. And,
Bob Daniel had a question.
yeah.
Bob, if you want to unmute yourself. He put it in the chat box. Is the driveway to parcel 1 now encroaching on the proposed vacation?
The driveway in parcel 1 has a encroachment maintenance agreement that encroaches on that existing sliver that we're talking about. That's correct.
My second question was just, Are the formal applicants one or all three of the contiguous property owners, and you're just helping them out?
Yeah, I'm just helping them out. That's right.
Zach, I see two public comments, one from Gregory Hearn, one from Matt Wallstrom. I don't know how you want to handle that. I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Sure. What do you, yeah, let's go. I'll allow Gregory. Gonna allow you to talk now.
Hi there. So I am actually one of the adjacent property owners on Parcel 1. When I purchased this house back in 2015, unfortunately, it wasn't properly disclosed to me that easement existed and that my driveway was actually on a paper street. My father was dying of cancer at the time, so I wasn't that as involved in the reading through every detail of the disclosure packet that I should have. I think the points that are most important here are, first of all, that other than, as Sohail pointed out, other than the utility infrastructure that's on the property, most of which is underground, the city has never really used this property. It's not suitable for any other particular purpose other than a utility access point. And I've been maintaining the section of the street adjacent to my parcel. My neighbors have been maintaining the other section of the street in terms of watering and planting and all of that stuff. So if walking down the road, you would never know there was a paper street there, which is why I didn't know when I initially purchased the land. Sohail has graciously offered to kind of help us navigate the process here. And I think to the question of what is the benefit to the city, it's tax revenue. Right now, that piece of property is not generating any revenue for the city. If indeed it is vacated and we can continue to use it the way we've been using it, we'll also be paying taxes on that. So that will be a benefit to the city. So right now, there's really no other use for the land. And, it does create somewhat of a security problem insofar as we have had instances where, kids or other people have used that as an entry point to get into houses, and a couple have broken in and so forth. So it has a potential for being problematic, but long term it's a pretty straightforward request. I think the city won't lose any access to utilities, but we'll start gaining additional tax revenue, and it'll give us a little bit more ability to to secure our properties and allow our build a fence enclosure so our dogs can walk around the entire house, that kind of thing.
And then going to mute you, Gregory. Thank you. Matt Wallstrom. Matt, you're unmuted.
Yes, hello? Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to confirm, is the helping out, has there been any kind of money exchange for this, or has there strictly just been some kind of favor?
No money exchange.
Okay.
Thank you, Ben. Saul.
I have a question.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
There's some criteria for what a street vacation. I haven't heard those particular criteria addressed in the discussion. Would be helpful for us for voting to know how it meets each of the criteria.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the criteria, I don't have all the bullet points in front of me, but the civil engineer that I brought on board has done all his due diligence and made sure that he's checked off all the boxes as far as conforming with the requirements as to this sliver of land not being needed for any other purposes or being beneficial for any other purposes. So, yeah, he's already gone through that process.
Okay. Well, my concern was talk about people using it as a cut through. Well, cut through is one of the criteria for keeping it.
Well, cut through, we're talking about like vagrants kind of going through and going into private property up the hill, because once they go past that section, they start entering other private property. And like Mr. Hearn was mentioning earlier, break-ins and vandalisms.
Okay. Well, that wasn't clear. That's why I asked. Thank you.
Sure.
Brer had a question. Brer, where are the existing property lines relative to the paper street?
The existing property lines relative to the paper street. So where you see the diagonal hatching, the border of the diagonal hatching, you see the dash lines. Those dash lines represent the existing property lines of parcel 1, parcel 3, and then to the north, parcel.
Hey guys.
Matt Medeiros?
Yeah, I have just a couple quick questions. I was just curious because I can't tell based on the overview and the map that was presented. Is the driveway of parcel 1 fully on the portion of the piece that he's going to receive, or is he going to be encroaching into parcel E?
Can you repeat that question, Matt?
It just looks like the driveway from parcel 1. I'm just looking at an overhead view on maps. It looks like a broad driveway that might encroach more than halfway into the vacated piece we're discussing here. I didn't know, and I was trying to pinpoint whether or not that was functional.
No, so the driveway is within that paper street section.
Okay.
And then there's, the neighbors, they're very close friends. So parcel 1, parcel 3, and parcel E, they've landscaped and vegetated certain areas around their respective frontage to this paper street.
Okay, and then 2 more quick questions. You said everyone's friendly and neighbors. Do we have any comments from the owners of parcel 3 or parcel E? Did they submitted anything? We heard from the gentleman in parcel 1, but I was just curious.
Yeah, I'm not sure if parcel 3 or parcel E are in attendance of this meeting. I haven't received anything in opposition because they are actually wanting the vacation.
Okay, and then my last question, just because I'm not positive on the rule of it, but the piece that they acquire, when you get appraised for tax purposes, are they only adding the appraisal to the added piece, or is it going to incur a full reappraisal of those properties for the city?
Yeah, that's beyond my knowledge.
From that standpoint, I just advise that all the property owners be aware of that in case there is a full appraisal.
There is a question from an anonymous attendee. Will there be an agreement among the site property description among the 3 parcels noted? I don't.
There's, I kind of understand that question, but there's really no agreement. I mean, they're all in favor of the vacation, so they will inherit their frontage of the vacation. And then the agreement that they're going to have is going to be with the city regarding the easements that the city is going to retain for infrastructure that's running through the vacated portion.
Okay, we have a motion to support from Clint and a second from Matt. Michael is muted. Should
I'm
all
back.
panelists be unmuted or have the ability to unmute themselves?
They should have the ability to unmute themselves. I believe I made that change to the settings. So
Looks like that's not taking place.
yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. It was unchecked. That was that was a setting error. So it should be good to go now.
There we are.
So we have a motion and a second. Shall we call the vote? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 For my purposes, getting opposed, I mean, it's good for all purposes, but if I
Okay.
can names of the opposed.
All opposed. State your name.
Dennis Sason.
And I am going to abstain because I was working too much technical aspect to be able to pay full attention.
I'll abstain as well as being vice chair for this item.
And this is Tom. I want to abstain. I don't feel I have enough information without photographs and other information. So that's why I'm abstaining.
And then so Hale's abstaining too, right? Four.
Two Hales recusing.
So that is one opposed, five abstain. Actually, could I get the support there?
Four.
Four.
Zach, would it help if everyone just wrote their response in the chat?
Yes, please. That would be good. These technical aspects are a little overwhelming right now. Thank you for bearing with me, everyone. Okay, I have Amy, William Smith, Brer, Roy, Clint, Stephen, Bill Ellig, and Bob, and Stu in support. One opposed, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in support, one opposed, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 abstaining. Motion.
Zach, you're doing great. Would it be helpful as we do these votes to just do a roll call vote where we just call up the names and respond? That make it easier for you?
Yeah, I feel like that'll be best. But was anything of what I said incorrect there?
Just make sure you separate recusal from a abstention. It's important.
Okay, thank you. So, Michael, was yours a recusal as well?
Mine is just an abstention.
Okay, Michael abstains. Yes, I have that noted.
Yeah, I think I see 16 board members here, and I feel like you didn't count off 16.
No, I did not. Okay, so let's do a roll call vote then.
But maybe I'm off. Let me. Looks like 16.
Okay. Roll call. All in favor? Please say your name.
Bob Daniel.
We have Amy, Bob,
Alec.
Stephen,
Alec.
William Smith.
Brer, William Smith,
Bill Alec.
Bill Ellig,
Stu.
Stu,
Gail.
Gail,
Clint.
Roy in favor.
Roy is in favor,
Clint.
Clint,
Matt.
Matt. There we go. And Bob, did I have you in there?
Yes, approved.
Okay. Amy, William, Brer, Roy, Clint, Stephen, Bill, Bob, Stu, Gail, Matt. $11 in favor, 1 opposed, 3 abstain, 1 recused.
Those numbers work.
Good. Finally.
All right.
Motion passes.
Great. Sorry for that, ladies and gentlemen. I should have programmed that a little bit better. Appreciate your patience. Let's move to action item 2, the Hillcrest Focused Plan Amendment. We have Michael Prince from the City of San Diego presenting on this. Michael, how much time do you need for this presentation again?
I'm thinking we'll probably need, hopefully, no more than 20 minutes. We'll try and move, fairly expeditiously, but we do have a lot to cover, both Emmanuel and myself. So can everybody see the screen here?
So before you begin, just so everybody understands, so Michael's going to do his presentation. He's looking for us to set up a subcommittee this evening for the Plan Hillcrest. And then what was the other thing I was going to mention? Oh, once he's finished, if there are any public comments on what he's presenting, again, please notify Zach. And then after public comment, we'll go into board comment. Go ahead, Michael.
Great. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Sohail, for the introduction. So my name is Michael Prince. I'm a senior planner with the Planning Department. And tonight we're presenting on the existing conditions mobility analysis. Can everybody see the screen here? And the presentation that I'm providing?
Yes.
Okay, so I see some thumbs up. Good to go. So tonight's team, it'll be myself and Emmanuel Alfora who will be presenting the existing conditions highlights that will be included in the atlas. We plan to post the atlas no later than the end of the week on our website, that we'll probably get it up tomorrow on planhillcrest.org. Also with us tonight is Shannon Mulderig, who's an associate planner in the planning department. She's presented previously, and she's been doing a lot of work on not only the existing conditions analysis, but also in sort of maintaining the website and outreach coordination. So got a lot of good team members. Okay, so tonight's focus and expected takeaways. Again, we want to provide a summary of existing demographic, land use, and mobility conditions. Provide a takeaway on feedback on key takeaways covering the existing conditions. As Suhail mentioned, we'd like to have a subcommittee established so that as we move forward into developing concepts, we can meet with the group in a smaller setting and allow for a more iterative process, and then bring back regular updates to the planning group on a monthly basis, and then have obviously the full discussion of the plan amendment once it's moving forward. And then we'll outline the next steps in the process. So just to recap the plan amendment's objectives, we've outlined 5 primary objectives for the Plan Hillcrest process. This includes celebrating the legacy of the LGBTQ+ community by preserving historical resources and creating inclusive spaces, creating public spaces that allows people to recreate, connecting people to businesses and services, strengthening connections for allowing people to get around the community easier and have better access, supporting local businesses to ensure a thriving and sustainable business district, and addressing our housing needs to address the affordable housing crisis and allowing for more opportunities next to transit. So as we've mentioned before, the proposed Plan Hillcrest process would amend the Uptown Community Plan. It would address the broader Hillcrest and Medical Complex neighborhoods, and in addition to addressing housing, would identify mobility and public space enhancements that would provide increased connections to the community. So want to provide a little bit of demographic setting and background for the area. Within the plan area, there are roughly 6,000 residents and 4,600 units that exist today. The demographics of the area include, we have typically smaller households. So there's about 1.76 persons per household. When you compare that to citywide, it's 2.84. So, almost a person less per household in Hillcrest. This is borne out also in the median household income, where it's slightly lower than citywide. Part of that might be because there's slightly smaller households, but it's just something to be aware of. The community also is a younger community compared to the city as a whole. So half of the residents are between the ages of 25 to 44, and it's a predominantly white community. The city as a whole is about 44% white, and the remainder a mixture of communities of color. In Hillcrest, it's about 65% Caucasian. In looking at the business summary and business locations in the community, the businesses are primarily concentrated along University Avenue as well as the numbered avenues, so 4th, 5th, and 6th. The highest number of businesses in terms of sheer volume is in the professional services and the personal care services. So your professional services are your accountants and your attorneys and those types of professions, and personal care would be, salons and spas and the like. While those businesses are the most predominant, there are roughly 22,000 jobs within the area, and 73% of those jobs are in the healthcare industry. Again, the Scripps Mercy and the UCSD Medical Complex are both major employment generators in the community and in the region as a whole. And this is kind of borne out in the commute patterns that we've seen in the community. So based on data from 2017, the employment area within Hillcrest is a major regional draw. You have people coming from all over, not just the city, but the region to commute into work into Hillcrest. This is 6 times greater than the number of individuals who live in Hillcrest and work elsewhere in the city or in the region. One thing to note is there are very few people who actually live and work in Hillcrest based on the numbers that we have from 2017. So of that 22,000, only 330 actually live and work in Hillcrest. As we look at some land use considerations and existing land uses within the area, One thing of note is that there's no single dominant land use category within the community in terms of what's existing on the ground today. There's a mixture of multifamily, institutional, and commercial uses throughout the area, as well as some single family and a very, very small amount of vacant space and parking lots. So most of the area is developed. And looking at the institutional uses, there are a number of public facilities within the plan area. Particular note are the recently developed Mission Hills Hillcrest Library at its new location on Washington Street, and the relatively new fire station on University Avenue. What is not currently in Hillcrest right now is public park space. There are no active parks or public parks within the community, or within the plan area, excuse me. Obviously, this is a topic of a priority. In the previous meetings, not only in the webinar, but in the community survey that we posted, we received the survey results that made public space a priority and park space within the community, particularly along Fifth Avenue and Normal Street. One thing to note is that while there's not any public park space within the community, there are existing privately owned public spaces. These include the Memorial Gardens at the Scripps Mercy Hospital, and then the plazas at the Village Hillcrest and the Hillcrest Center. So these are examples of public plazas and public spaces that can be used as sort of, to emulate what could potentially be replicated in the future, in addition to identifying areas for greater recreation opportunities. In shifting the discussion and the focus to housing, we've covered this before, but I just wanted to provide a recap that between 2010 and 2017, the population within Uptown grew 4 times faster when compared with the city and the county. However, despite that population growth within the Uptown community as a whole, the housing growth has not kept pace, with only 2.6% increase in dwelling units in that same time frame. Another trend that that we've seen is that within the Hillcrest area, roughly 75% of residents are renters. That's far higher than the citywide average, where renters make up approximately 54% of the residents within the city. Rents are comparable between 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom median rents when looking at apartments between Hillcrest and San Diego. But one of the concerns of the rental prices is its impact on individuals and families that earn less than the median income, because rents are high and it creates a rent burden for some families. In looking at the adopted land use plan, and the housing capacity, housing is identified and allowed in 72% of the plan area. And the plan area has a capacity of 14,000 dwelling units based on the assumed build out of all of the land uses within the community plan area. The one sort of caveat in that area is that the hospital and the institutional uses, while they may have underlying zones that would allow for residential, we wouldn't assume that those develop as residential as their existing hospital complexes. So despite the fact that there's 72% of the area that does allow for housing, there's currently today only 44% of the land within Hillcrest has housing in it. So while there's 14,000 units capacity based on the current adopted plan, only 4,600 units exist today. In looking at sort of the composition of those residential units, roughly half of the units have a density of 60 to 100 units per acre. So within the medium to medium high categories that are identified in the community plan, and then up to the residential high category as well. Another thing to note within the residential density range is that a lot of the newer projects that have been built in the last 10 and 20 years have been higher density projects. So think of the Egyptian and Mr. Robinson along Park Boulevard, as well as the Atlas building and Strauss along Fifth Avenue. In looking at the development patterns within the community, some of this was touched in the Diego Velasco's presentation during the live webinar a couple months back. The majority of the parcels within the area are less than 10,000 square feet. And most of the parcels that are above 50,000 square feet, so above an acre, are typically occupied either by medical complex or large developments like the Uptown Center. In looking at the development within those parcel sizes, one of the things that we evaluate is the floor area ratio. So the amount of development intensity in comparison to the land area that a particular lot or parcel has. So the majority of parcels have less than a 1.0 FAR. Again, sort of what that means is that in some instances, they may not be utilizing the entire lot area for the development footprint. Again, another point that I think is kind of interesting to note is that in addition to the Scripps Mercy and the UCSD medical complex, where you have larger buildings that take up greater FAR, a lot of the newer developments do exhibit that as well. So again, referencing the Strauss, the Atlas, Mr. Robinson, those types of buildings have seen FARs that are likely above 2.0 as well. So in looking at sort of how we address housing, and again, this is just, I wanted to caveat that this is one of the sort of 5 objectives that we're going to address, but we wanted to at least address this topic tonight in advance of some of the other topics that we'll cover with the subcommittee, and then this in more detail later. We want to build upon the supporting policies in the direction of the community plan, which is to locate higher density residential and to create livelier commercial districts and encourage high intensity and pedestrian oriented mixed use development within the Hillcrest core and the community village areas. In addition to sort of the policy support, as we presented at the last meeting, we did have a community survey which had hundreds of responses. And within that, there was a support for adding housing capacity, particularly within the Hillcrest core. So the area between First, the 163, Washington to Robinson, as well as along the avenues. So a little bit further south of the core, along 4th, 5th, and 6th, and in the area between Washington and Normal Street. So as we looked at that, that's one factor in terms of identifying where potential opportunities may exist in terms of developing concepts for allowing for more housing within the area. Another opportunity considerations is that we want to evaluate what the current uses are within this area. So not only just the existing land uses, but what are sort of the recent developments or areas that are unlikely to develop. So this, of the 380 acre areas, everything that is in color that is not yellow represents about 145 acres. So maybe about half of the area. These includes condominium developments, publicly owned parcels, the medical complex facilities, which are going through their own process, and you'll hear about one of them later tonight. And then areas that are either recent developments like the projects I mentioned previously or historic sites. So those are all captured within this area. And it just gives us an understanding of where we are likely to see sort of new private development come in and where that may be less likely given sort of the makeup and composition of development that is in the community today. So with all that in mind, we just wanted to sort of set the stage here tonight and sort of go over those key highlights. I'll turn it over to Emmanuel to talk about the mobility existing conditions summary, but I wanted to sort of highlight some of the next steps as it relates to land use and housing before we get into the mobility component. So again, we want to build on the general plan, climate action plan, and community plan policies, evaluate and refine the areas with the potential to change. So what that really represents is just an initial sort of outline of where these areas could occur. It does not represent a specific proposal, nor does it represent a direction that we are likely to take. We want to evaluate the opportunity and the potential for growth and utilize the community feedback we've received to date and that we plan to receive not only from the full planning group, but from the subcommittee that will be established as well to really sort of identify opportunities for housing and urban design and mobility connections throughout this process. So that was a lot of me talking. I apologize, but I'll hand it over to Emmanuel, who will go over mobility.
Thank you, Mike. Can you get to the next slide? So good evening. My name is Emmanuel Forja, and I'm an assistant engineer with the city's planning department. I will be presenting on the mobility needs for the Hillcrest Focused Plan Amendment. Existing conditions data and analysis was collected and performed for the study area, but it should also be noted that we are not limited by this boundary to recommend improvements to enhance mobility connections within Uptown and to other communities. Next slide. Okay. So for commute statistics, according to the U.S. Census, Hillcrest commuters utilize alternate modes of transportation at a rate nearly double than the city or region for walking and transit, and around triple for biking. This trend is also reflected in the community survey that was taken this year as part of this effort, where it shows the primary commute mode for those that responded to the survey that live and work in Hillcrest, walked or biked. Also, commuting to or from the neighborhood showed notable active mode shares as well. These statistics highlight the walkability of the neighborhood, and this effort is to further enhance and support that quality and balance the mobility networks for all users. Next slide. I will now go into the mobility needs for each mode, starting with vehicles. As a starting point, this effort is to support and build upon the policies developed in the current community plan, and use this opportunity to flesh out those policies with mobility improvements as applicable. The main vehicle-related policies include providing a complete street network that accommodates all users, improving interchanges at freeways, improve emergency vehicle access to the medical complex, and provide improvements that provide safety for all modes, and utilize technology solutions to increase mobility and parking management efficiency. Next slide. Our next step was to collect relevant data and perform analysis that would inform the vehicle needs within the study area. This included collecting intersection and roadway counts, collision history for the most recent 5 years of data available, performing travel time and speed surveys, and analyzing those travel times and travel speeds from those surveys and comparing it to the posted speed as a proxy for congestion in the travel speed ratio analysis. It should be noted that this data collection occurred prior to the COVID stay-at-home orders. Next slide. As an example of the data and analysis effort, this map displays the travel speed ratio analysis. As shown, the ratio is the percentage of the actual travel speed divided by the posted speed. For example, if the actual speed experienced was 15 miles per hour in the 30 mile per hour zone, the ratio would be 50%. With this understanding, we use low ratios as a proxy to the congestion experienced. The darker the blue, the lower the ratio. This analysis was done for the PM, pictured in this map right here, but also for the AM and midday peak hours. Next slide. The combined information from the data analysis led to the creation of the existing conditions, streets and freeways needs map that synthesizes the issues related to vehicular mobility needs. The key takeaway is that, as most of you know, the corridors of Washington and University carry most of the traffic to and from the neighborhood, and Washington, to and from the neighborhood. Washington experiences higher travel speed ratio due to its auto-oriented nature. University carries comparable traffic to Washington, but experiences lower speed ratios due to having more intersections, being the main transit corridor through the study area, and interactions with bikes and pets. These corridors also experienced a high number of vehicle collisions over a 5-year period at several of their intersections. Additionally, the lower speed ratios during the peaks occur primarily west of the 163 during the peak hours. Next slide. In a parallel effort, the community was asked to identify locations where vehicle improvements are needed. The community identified a University between 4th and 6th Avenues, and connections to SR 163 as high priority locations. Combining these locations with the existing conditions analysis to determine the needs and guided by the community plan policies will help to develop the appropriate mobility improvement recommendations for vehicular needs. Next slide. Next is transit needs. The Uptown Plan policy includes pursuing additional transit options in the community, including light rail, streetcar, and rapid buses. As Sandyke is currently updating the regional transit network for the update to the regional plan, the city will continue to work with Sandyke to retain these priorities in their updated plans. Other transit policies include improving transit stop amenities and implement transit priority measures. Next slide. The data and analysis for transit existing conditions are pretty much the same as the ones for vehicles, as they share the same space in the public right of way. But it's also further supplemented by data from MTS. Next slide. So Hillcrest is served by 7 bus routes, and most transit stops are located on University. As shown on this map, most of the daily boardings and alightings occur on University as well. Next slide. On the transit needs map, segments of the Washington Street and University Avenue corridors are affected by low travel speed ratios, which may affect transit on-time performance as buses are sitting in the same congestions as other vehicles. Additionally, University serves several of the bus lines that go through Hillcrest and has most of the stops in the study area with high demand. Bus stops with close proximity to pedestrian or bicycle-involved collisions are located mainly on University and Washington. Next slide. The community also identified University Avenue as a priority for transit improvements, specifically at 9th Avenue and between 3rd and 6th. Additionally, they recommended dedicated lanes, expanded trolley service, and improved bus stops as potential improvements. The existing conditions analysis reveals some underlying needs at these and other locations in the study area that will serve to inform our recommended transit improvements. Next slide. The bicycle policies in the community seek to improve bike connections to and from the community, as well as within the community. There's also a desire to provide a continuous bike facility along University Avenue throughout the community. Additionally, the community plan wanted to promote bike riding by providing facilities that are suitable for all ages and abilities. The community plan and Sandag's Uptown Bikeways project propose additional separated bike facilities that would serve and enhance the bicycling environment in Hillcrest. This effort will seek to build upon those efforts to improve cycling for commuter and recreational purposes. Next slide. To determine the underlying bicycle needs for existing conditions, data in the form of bicycle intersection counts, collision history, and existing facilities was collected and supplemented by analysis from the bicycle demand model, the city's bicycle demand model, bicycle connectivity analysis, and bicycle level of stress analysis. The city's bicycle demand model estimates the demand for bicycling based on factors including proximity to major activity centers and land use diversity. Most of Hillcrest is high demand. Bicycle connectivity evaluates the potential to travel to different locations within a 3/4 mile travel distance on a bike. Next slide. Bicycle level of traffic stress, or LTS, is a unique analysis for bicycle needs. It is a point-based system that classifies the networks on the level of stress that could potentially cause cyclists. LTS 1 and 2 are typically suitable for all riders regardless of age or ability, while 3 and 4 are typically used by riders that are more confident and fearless. LTS scores are affected by the type and quality of bike facility available, volume of adjacent traffic, and as well as the posted speed limit. Hillcrest is bisected by high-stress roadways in the north and south by Washington Avenue and east-west by 6th Avenue. Additionally, roadways are shown to switch from lower stress to higher stress roadways for cyclists, such as University, Robinson, 4th and 5th Avenues. Next slide. As shown previously, the high-stress corridors on Washington, 6th, and Park Boulevard are highlighted on the existing conditions bicycle needs map. These corridors serve as potential barriers to bicycle connectivity not only within the study area, but to the rest of Uptown and the adjacent communities as well. University is also the main cycling corridor through the study area, with around 50 bicycles crossing various intersections during the peak hours. Intersections along this corridor were also locations that numerous bicycle-involved collisions occurred over a 5-year period. Next slide. The community identified University from 3rd to 6th and Washington as high priority locations for bicycle improvements. Consistent with the community plan policies, they also recommended protected bike lanes and continuous facilities. In addition to those recommendations, the needs map shows there is a need for connections north and south of Washington and potential intersection improvements for cycling, such as bike signals. Next slide. Uptown and especially Hillcrest is a very walkable area. The community plan policies seek to promote and enhance this quality by improving pedestrian crossings and connections. Washington Street and connections to the medical complex are highlighted with their own policies within the plan. This plan amendment gives us the opportunity to expand and further flesh out the potential of those policies. Next slide. The data that went into creating the pedestrian needs map also include pedestrian intersection crossing counts and 5-year collision history, with the addition of a missing sidewalks inventory. Like the bicycle demand model, the pedestrian priority model evaluated the propensity for walking in the city, throughout the city, and Hillcrest typically scored higher on the higher end of that spectrum. The Pedestrian Environment Quality Evaluation, or PEQI, analyzes the pedestrian amenities available along roadways and intersections. Next slide. This is an example of pedestrian intersection counts in the PM peak period. The highest intersection crossing demand is in the core of Hillcrest. This was also done for the AM and midday peaks. Next slide. So the PEQI evaluates the pedestrian environment based on items such as sidewalk width, parkways, and shade trees on sidewalk segments, and crosswalks and pedestrian countdown timers at intersections. It is a point-based system, and based on the score, segments and intersections are classified as low, medium, or high. This analysis shows that most of the segments in the study area scored high, but none of the intersection crossings scored high. Though most of those intersections scored medium, indicating at least some operational improvements such as high visibility crosswalks or countdown timers. No intersections in Hillcrest currently have lead pedestrian intervals that would give pedestrians a head start to cross into the street before any vehicle movement is allowed. Next slide. The existing conditions pedestrian needs map, based on the data analysis, shows there is a noticeable gap in pedestrian access along Washington Street. Also, the highest pedestrian demand during the peaks occurs in the core, where additional improvements could be made to improve the crossing environment. Additionally, connections to cross Washington to connect the core and the medical complex could also benefit from additional improvements. Next slide. In general, the community identified locations for pedestrian improvements consistent with the existing conditions pedestrians needs map, specifically west of the 163 and along Washington and University. The community also recommended improving crossings at intersections, wider sidewalks, shade trees, and connections across the 163. Next slide. So the next step for mobility in this effort is to develop mobility improvements and concepts that support and build on the policy framework of the community plan. These improvements will start at the locations and recommendations made by the community and utilize information gathered from the existing conditions analysis to address the underlying needs to make thoughtful and effective mobility improvement recommendations. We then look forward to bringing these recommendations back to the community for feedback and refinements. This ends my portion of the presentation, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, I was on mute. So I'll just wrap it up with a couple quick slides. So in addition to sort of the next steps, we'll also be looking at the LGBTQ plus historic context statement. And when that's ready for release and discussion with the community, we would like to either bring it for the board for consideration just as an avenue, or we may host it as a separate live webinar, just depending upon scheduling and other sort of community priorities. We'll also be looking at our public space opportunity areas and continue meeting with the subcommittee going forward and the full planning group. In terms of potential next steps, we do have a planning commission workshop, which will sort of present some of the existing conditions information that was presented here tonight, as well as the survey report outcomes and the outcomes from the webinar that occurred at previous meetings. So that will be next Thursday, July 16th at the Planning Commission. It's just an informational workshop to get early input from the Planning Commission. Potential future meetings could include again, like I mentioned, the public historic context statement, looking at public space opportunities and concepts, and then mobility and urban design. And so we'll start to have those discussions again next month and in the fall. And then sort of overall, as we start to develop those concepts and develop the draft amendment, we'll release that for public review towards the end of the year, early next year, go through the CEQA process and then the public hearing process in 2021 and 2022. So you guys know how to get a hold of us, I'm sure, but if you don't, the information's on here. It's also on planhillcrest.org. The presentation is not currently posted on the website right now, but we will be posting it tomorrow morning on the website, and as well as we'll have this recording up when we have it ready and loaded. With that, we're done, and thank you for your time, everyone.
Good. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate your time. All right, Mr. Boonshoff, do we have any public comments on this presentation? You got to unmute yourself.
Yes, we do. So far, I have Matt Wallstrom and Michael Donovan. For the only public comments, going to go to Matt Wallstrom. Going to allow you to talk right now.
Mr. Wallstrom.
First, I just had a question. For Michael at the beginning, can you repeat those numbers for Hillcrest, the population numbers that you mentioned?
Yeah, 6,000. Those are, I don't have the exact number, but it was roughly 6,000 residents currently within Hillcrest.
Residents or residential units?
No, residents. So actual individuals, 6,000 individuals.
Okay, because the reason being is because I have the 2010 census tract data, and it says that the population of Hillcrest, and that's what I got from your planning department, was the population's 10,053. So I'd like to point out that that means that the population has actually gone down 4,000 from what it was in 2010. So I think that's relevant. The other thing the other question is specified was for the other presenter there said under mobility pedestrians that said that there are, of all the lighted intersections, there are none that allow pedestrians to get a head start ahead of traffic.
Let me answer as it relates to, I haven't evaluated the 2010 census numbers in relation to the outline of the 380 acres that pertain to both the medical complex and the Hillcrest neighborhoods. We will certainly look at those population numbers within this area and can follow up at the next meeting.
Okay.
And then I'll ask Emmanuel to answer the question regarding the intersections.
This is Maureen. I might just speak up on that one. I'm not sure if Emmanuel had a different data layer he was looking at, because I know for a fact I took a picture of the LPI at Fifth and University at one point for a document. So we may have just been referencing an older inventory for the LPIs in Hillcrest.
Okay. Yeah, because that's definitely something that because I know that intersection as well. So and I know there are a couple of others around the neighborhood. Okay, so I just have real quick five observations, questions that I've got, and I can run through them and I can also add them in the chat. First one is I don't understand why are we reopening all of the Hillcrest and medical complex area when the only area in the left out of the UCP plan, 2016 UCP, was the Hillcrest core, which is about a four blocks by 6 block area. So it seems really peculiar to reopen all of Hillcrest. As the technical, number two, the technical issues during this meeting indicate this isn't the time or format for conducting this kind of critical public discussion, and it arguably violates both the Brown Act and the Badgley-Keene open meeting laws. Three, this plan or proposal does not reflect the changes from COVID, including but not limited to transit and work live situations. And as it is, the current Uptown Commute Plan is not in conformance with the environmentally superior CEQA option, the density redistribution alternative. This plan amendment would make the situation worse. And finally, this will incentivize demolishing existing affordable housing without ensuring that it is replaced with any or equal greater number of new affordable housing.
Thank you, Mr. Walser. Let's go through.
We have Michael Donovan, public comment.
Sure. Mr. Donovan, any of your questions differing from Mr. Wallstrom's?
Michael, you should be able to speak now. Hold on.
He's still muted.
Does anyone see Michael? Let's see. Disappeared on my end.
I don't.
He's giving a great speech right now in his video, but he's muted.
He is giving a great speech.
All right, how's that?
That's better.
There we go.
Okay. Couple of things. Thanks to Michael Prince and team for such great work so far. Really appreciate the effort that's been put forward. Couple of observations. When I look at the planning area, I think it's an appropriate area to focus on, but I'm noticing that the shape and direction of that is leading to a lot of east-west focus because it doesn't really take into account or seem to take into account a lot of the connectivity and continuity to the rest of Uptown and to the other surrounding communities. For example, the numbered avenues connect to downtown. There's a lot of things going on down there that people who live in that area are going to want to interact with. And so we need to make sure that we don't end up with heavy residential abutting something totally different as the plans intersect. I know that's something you're looking at, but as you're surveying the community, I don't see the impact of that. Secondly, as we talk about live, work, play communities, UCSD, as I recall, in their plan for redeveloping the hospital, is going to be adding significant amount of residential space for their employees. And so we need to think about who we're trying to attract and for what in the Hillcrest core area that we're talking about. Are we looking at attracting businesses for entrepreneurial space, for small business space, so that we can bring the jobs and the people who would consume this residential space? Because I think the existing community is not necessarily one that is economically set up to buy into a lot of the new condos that are being built. So we need to think a lot about, are we building live, works, play space, or are we building a bedroom community that sits off to the side of where people work? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. Any other public comment?
Yes, it looks like Lou Railing. Allowing you to talk, Lou.
Hi. I want to thank you for the presentation and for providing some research. It's great to see that you're the facts that you're putting into studying this project. Before I offer my comments, I would like to say something that came up at the end of the last meeting when people expressed concerns about this focused plan amendment. Someone made the comment that they were to be against it would be to be anti-housing, anti the future of children in Hillcrest. It was shameful. I just want to counter that by saying I don't can't imagine anyone who disagrees with the overall goals of this, which are kind of mom and apple pie. No one's anti-housing. So I hope that all the members of the board can hear views that might differ from theirs, or that might, find things to have concerns about in this plan, and not globalize and assume that there's ill will or no care for the future or no care for children or no care for anything. And we can maybe avoid shaming around having the differences of opinion that make any community strong. I want to comment on my first, because I know there's a time limit on this. The first thing I want to say is my biggest concern, it has to do with new housing units that would come in being truly affordable, as opposed, and the possibility of, even if some so-called affordable units are allowed, that they would displace more affordable units that already exist. And I think that's got to be our biggest concern in this community and in this plan. And I'm concerned about there not being safeguards around that. I'm also concerned, as I also want to raise a question that some of the demographics confuse me. You talk about Hillcrest, and it's not clear if you're referring to Hillcrest, the neighborhood as a whole, or Hillcrest, just the focused plan amendment part of Hillcrest, when you issue those demographics. And I think when you put this slideshow up, it would be good to clarify, do you mean Hillcrest, just the focused plan amendment, or do you mean all of Hillcrest, which includes some areas that are not included in the focused plan? I'd also like to mention on the issue of commuters in and commuters out, and how there's only 330 people who live and work in Hillcrest. Even in 2017, pre-COVID, a lot of people were working at home. And so the commuter model, that assuming everybody's commuting, well, first that everybody's working, and second that everybody's commuting one place or another, strikes me as inadequate to doing quite that kind of a study. And it would be useful to have the additional information that's not, because it's not just about commuting, it's also about living and working here and shopping here and all of those things that people do who may not be commuters at all. And having lived here for 5 years, being someone who worked at home, I'm sensitive to that. Pre-COVID, and just one other thing I'd like to mention, which has to do with the environmental costs of the amount of demolition, given the small amount of space that you say is available now. Obviously, demolition is a big part of the plan, and while there's a great historic element to this focused plan amendment with LGBTQ history, it's not clear how existing buildings might be adapted or reused as part of smart urban planning, as opposed to the environmentally cautious, costly, and the long transition period that's involved with new building. So thank you for allowing me this much time, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Lou. Thank you.
Thank you, Lou. We have another comment. We have Jill Weisberg. Just one moment, Jill. There we go. Jill, you are unmuted. Oh. You're going to have to unmute yourself as well.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought you were just going to ask my question for me, which is if only 300 some people who live in Hillcrest work in Hillcrest, do we have information about where everybody's going, whether they're working at home, where they're commuting to, and are there any plans to make improvements to those commutes from within Hillcrest, or more options for commutes?
Thank you, Jill. All right, Michael, do you want to take a second and respond to these questions?
Yeah. Yes, thank you. So I'll also cover a couple, I think, that are in the chat here. So I'll try and go in some sort of order.
If we can we have one more in, so if we could just have
oh, sure. Yeah,
Arlene Hauser, just one moment, Arlene. Have you ask your question, and then oops. There we go. Go ahead, Arlene.
I thought I heard that the projection that there was no housing on medical center campuses, and the new UCSD campus, which will no longer be just the hospital, does include, as someone mentioned, about 1,000 housing units. It started out being for students. Now they're talking about students and employees and anyone associated with the university. But I'm curious if that is included in the projections for population and available housing that will be available in the area.
Thank you very much.
So, okay, there's one other comment in the chat from Charles Kaminsky. I can just read it verbatim. I am not a Hillcrest resident, but a visitor and someone who has seen Hillcrest morph over the last 45 years. Number one, are the bicycle car interactions due to traffic rule observations or ignoring lights? Number two, what has been the turnover in the last 10 years of population as to age and mobility? And number three, what exactly is the action item? Please just ask my questions. I do not wish to speak. So request granted on the last one. And Suhail, if you'd like, I could go through sort of some of these comments.
Yeah, please. Let's keep it efficient here. So,
sure. So as it relates to the UCSD projections for the Hillcrest Medical Campus, those are not included in the adopted land use assumptions that were presented tonight, but we are aware of those 1,000 units that are projected as part of the long-range development plan and will be factored into the analysis and the concepts moving forward. Not just the housing, but also the mobility changes, including street vacations and other connections to and from the campus. Mary Brown asked a question is, will consideration be given to the unique architecture of many of the buildings in the area, and who will decide which buildings will be preserved? So the historic preservation regulations and the historical resources regulations, there's a process within the municipal code. We are not proposing to change that. There is the historic context statement, which will not only evaluate the LGBTQ plus and cultural and historical resources and perhaps create a specific thematic district around the LGBTQ plus community, but all properties over 45 years old would go through the historical review consistent with the current regulations. Again, I'm sort of bouncing around here. I'll ask either Emmanuel or Maureen to answer the bicycle car interactions due to traffic light observations.
Yeah, so according to the data that we have for the five-year collision history for bicycle-involved collisions, the primary cause was improper turning and the bicycle going into the automobile right away.
Okay, thank you. And then I just want to finish on Charles's other comments. So what has been the turnover in the last 10 years? I don't have that information offhand in terms of age and mobility, but that is something that we can evaluate and follow up with at the next meeting. What is exactly is the action item? So the action item for tonight before the planning group is to determine the subcommittee composition for future meetings to have these discussions sort of in that subcommittee process. And then the future action item that will occur ultimately will be a proposal to amend the community plan to reflect any changes that come about for this 380-acre area that was outlined in the presentation and on the website. With regards to that area, to answer Lou's comments, the demographic data is that we identified as Hillcrest I should have been more articulate in that. Was just within the plan area. So it's not the broader Hillcrest neighborhood, which extends beyond the boundaries. It's just the outline of Hillcrest neighborhood and medical complex sections that are within the focused amendment area. I appreciate all the comments. So I didn't want to necessarily single out any one of them. Everybody's comments are greatly appreciated. As it relates to Michael Donovan's comments about the east-west focus at the potential detriment to a north-south mobility focus. We do plan to evaluate mobility connections beyond just sort of the boundaries that are there. So if there are bicycle connections or improvements along 4th Avenue and they extend further south along Walnut, we're not just going to stop those as in terms of planned or identified needed facility enhancements within this area. We will look to make connections to downtown, to Mission Valley, to North Park, and to Balboa Park. Those will extend beyond this boundary, where appropriate and where relevant. I know Matt had a fairly sort of robust list of comments. Why are we looking at Hillcrest? Again, we're looking at the broader subcommittee area, or excuse me, the subcommittee. I saw something come up from Gail. And we're looking at the broader Hillcrest area to, again, look at connections, identify new public spaces and mobility enhancements, as well as to address our housing needs. That's why we extended the study area beyond east of 163 over to Park Boulevard. We extended it north to include the medical complex to address the changes that are going to occur with the Scripps Mercy development, as well as the UCSD's medical campus, and looking at all of those areas. The Brown Act is in effect. There is no violation of the Brown Act by this meeting or by any meetings that the planning department has. There have been changes to the Brown Act, which are posted on the city's website, consistent with the governor's executive order, that allow for these meetings to take place. And we do allow for comment and input through this process. Changes as it relates to COVID, the only thing I can say to that is we're still sort of in the early stages of understanding COVID and the novel coronavirus. And one thing that we do know is that public health response times are really important. And as we begin to get more information, we will evaluate and take that into consideration in planning our recommendations and concepts through this effort. We are sort of at the beginning stage of this process and identifying existing conditions and opportunities, not at the end of it. The environmental document will be handled, once we actually have a draft plan in place, and we'll go through that environmental process. And I think that got most of the stuff. That didn't really answer Suhail's question of keeping it brief, though, so I apologize.
Okay, no, that was perfect. Thank you so much, Michael. I'm gonna go one at a time on the board members and just pick at you. And if you have a comment to make, please feel free. Let's start with Stephen Klein.
I don't have anything to add.
No, okay, thank you, Stephen. Clint Daniels.
Thanks for the presentation. Just a couple of quick questions, and I don't need a response, but just something I noticed as you were going through the slides to maybe go back and take a look at. I forget what slide number was, the mode share slide, the pedestrian percentages you had on there seemed a little high. And then on slide 44, the western terminus of University you had marked as an easy bikeway, low stress bikeway, and 4th and 5th with the full, or at least with 5th with the full bike lanes as a higher stress level bikeway. So maybe just go back and take a look at those again real quick as you move forward. Specific comments though on slide 34 in terms of congestion. I do realize there's congestion in Hillcrest, and it is an annoyance for a lot of folks who live in the community. But I just want to hopefully reiterate the point that the solving congestion should not be making it easier to drive, but making it faster to drive for folks, which will increase pedestrian and bicycle collisions and kill more people. Slide 47 had some really nice trees on it, so please don't forget to add trees when we're talking about this and a real sustainable way to add trees. And then the last point I wanted to make was just on slide number 27. And I apologize, Michael, I'm jumping all over the place as I'm running through these quickly. Slide number 27, in terms of housing, and just pointing out the fact that while there might be a lot of opportunities for housing in Hillcrest, there are real practicalities to building that housing. So lot aggregation, return on investment for developers to make it worthwhile for their money to go into that investment. Any potential remediation. So the notion that there is capacity here is a lot of paper capacity and not a lot of real capacity. And so, as we approach housing, we should be thinking about how can we actually create real capacity as opposed to fictional capacity that nobody in the free market is willing to take on. And then just the last point on affordable housing. I will just say that two of the biggest projects that have come to the Uptown Planners recently Olive Street actually created affordable housing, deed restricted affordable housing where there was none before, as well as the Thorn Street project that we approved last couple months ago, created deed restricted affordable housing. So the notion that we're building housing, and not creating affordable housing is somewhat of a myth. We are conscious of that, and we are moving forward due to a lot of the work that the city council has done to add inclusionary practices to their policies. So that's it. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Clint. Mr. Sisson, any comments?
Couple of comments, maybe just one thought. Michael, no offense, but we had about 55 slides of statistics, and I'm reminded of W.C. Fields. If you can't do it with brilliance, baffle them with statistics. I'll be honest, way too much. But my main general comment is when I first joined Uptown Planners, it was at the tail end of a 5-year process that planners and a specific committee had put a lot of effort into coming up with a recommendation to the city. Within a matter of months, the Gateway Group came in and changed the whole thing and resubmitted something that was finally approved by the city. And this new community focused plan amendment seems to have just come out of the blue for me. And I'm still, after 55 slides of statistics, trying to understand what are the key differences between this and what we have if we do nothing. General question.
Thank you, sir. Let's go to Mr. Dahl.
Let's see. One of my comments on the pedestrian stuff is I don't know why the technical people can't get through their heads that when you're walking around the neighborhood, the most important thing are working countdown clocks and not having to push buttons to cross streets when there's no reason to have to push buttons because it should have come on anyway because it was going to be green for 2 minutes. So if you're walking up and down University Avenue, you keep coming to intersections where the crosswalk light is don't cross, but yet it's going to be green for another 30 seconds and you could have easily crossed. It messes people up. It makes walking around this neighborhood a lot worse than it should be. For a small investment, and it's probably a lot bigger investment than it should be, but for a small investment in timing our clocks, the countdowns should count down, should turn green when they should, without pushing the button if it's going to be green for long enough. It should count down properly. If somebody pushes the light to cross University on one side of Vermont, the other side should go on. You shouldn't have to cross both sides. You shouldn't have somebody crossing the street while the other person is looking at a don't cross sign and thinking what's going on, and then halfway through start running across the street in front of traffic. There's so many little things that we've talked about for years and don't get picked up on that would make the pedestrian aspect of this plan a lot easier to accomplish. And I just wish that we'd get through to the people in charge. So I'll just get that off my chest.
Great. Thank you very much. Mr. Smith.
Yeah, just one comment. I want to point out the importance of paying attention to the pedestrian connection between the Ed Center and the Normal Street Promenade. Getting across there almost requires an overpass or some major changes to the roadway, but it's crucial if there's going to be dense, affordable housing on the Ed Center property at all. We need to connect that to the promenade, and also the DMV site. Again, if it's possible to get the state to build some mixed use there and stay there. Is my opinion, so that you've got a lot of people waiting around for appointments who could activate the street. I think even though the Ed Center is not quite on in the area, it's an important source of the pedestrian activity on the promenade. So please pay attention to that.
Great. Thank you, sir. Mr. McGraw.
Thanks, Michael. That's all for me.
All right. Bunshaft.
I want to second Roy's comment there, or echo his comment, especially in this new COVID environment. People are not going to want to touch buttons in order to be able to cross the street. And also, I want to echo Bill's comment there about, we really need to take into part the normal street promenade. And we want people promenading there. We want people gathering there. And we have an entire neighborhood right next door, University Heights, that we'd like to bring a lot of people over, and the connectivity has got to be better there. So I didn't quite see as much as I'd like to see. I think that's when I'm riding my electric bike in that area on where Washington meets Normal and Park. I find that area to be especially dangerous, and I didn't quite see that as reflected as I'd like to see. I saw more of the focus on Washington and University, which are certainly important, but I feel like that really needs to be included as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Mr. Marsh.
Okay. Hi there. Thanks for that. That was great. I always enjoy your presentations. My comments, I have two things I want to comment on. The first is, I'm really concerned about how this plan is going to be addressing inclusivity in Hillcrest, especially after seeing your facts that 65% of the population is white. And this is significantly higher than the rest of San Diego. I think we have an opportunity to address this in the housing component of this plan and also in the mobility component. Housing, obviously, with how we incentivize and promote affordable housing, and in mobility, how we prioritize street users. I mean, if I could just suggest that there is a hierarchy of who uses the street. And at the moment, automobiles are at the top of that. If we reorient this in such a way to where pedestrians are at the top, bicycles and active mobility are second, public transit is third, local deliveries are fourth, and private automobiles are fifth, I think we would see a dramatic shift in the inclusivity of how our streets are utilized. I would also like to comment on your map about bicycle LTS measurements. I thought that was great to see that you're using this measurement, but your map differs significantly from a map that was published in a research paper on level of traffic stress and GPS access in our neighborhood, done by Katie Chris at UCSD. And I'm just going to post that here to the chat. So you.
Barry, you're on mute. You got to unmute yourself.
Was I on mute the whole time?
No, just for the last 5 seconds.
Sorry about that. So I'm going to post this link here. And she has a map in there showing her studies LTS graphic of our neighborhood, and it differs significantly from yours. Robinson is not a level 1 and 2 corridor, and neither is the west end of University. I think you need to look at that again. But outside of those comments, I really enjoyed your presentation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mullaney.
Yes, thank you. And I did have a few things. So first of all, to Emmanuel and Michael Prince, I want to make sure you're aware that the city spent $400,000 on transportation studies during the community plan update. Every intersection was measured, photographed. So hopefully you're making use of some of that data. The second thing is the city is having serious budget problems. So Sandag, the Sandag leader said that all of their big programs they were anticipating are on hold now. So at some point, not necessarily tonight, I'd like Michael to answer where the money would be coming from for transportation improvements and all that. But into this group, I would like to say, let's not get our hopes up too much for large amounts of city investment. I think they're going to be struggling for a long time. The third thing I wanted to mention is upzoning can be done excessively. When you do it too much, what you do is you kill incentive programs. So I think, the city is working on a program now called Complete Communities. It has incentives for floor area ratios. So if you give away high density and tall heights, none of the incentive programs work. The last thing I wanted to bring up is urban design. During our 7 years on the community plan update, we spent way too much time talking about density and height, and we never really got good urban design. So an example, paseos, to break up some of those long blocks on University and 10th Avenue in there, we could plan ahead for paseos and make that work. Courtyard retail. Some of you have been to Santa Barbara. When you're shopping, you can step in off the busy street, have a quiet place to shop. There must be some way to incentivize courtyard retail. Lastly, wider sidewalks. If we want wide, walkable communities, we have to make sure that we don't have such a narrow sidewalk that you feel that you're going to step in front of a bus if you step a few feet over. So I would like us to all work on urban design improvements as we go through this.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Ms. Freed.
Hi, thanks. So I just wanted to comment about, there was a comment about this is not the way to do a meeting, and I honestly am going the opposite way and thinking this is way more involvement than we've ever had at any meeting, or we almost had over 70 people tonight on this call. So I have to say it's different, and the slide presentation was great. I am on these kind of presentations all day long, so thank you for the work that you're putting into that. I'm excited about this whole plan. I keep talking to my neighbors about it, spreading the word. People are getting frustrated currently living in this neighborhood. Things are closing, things aren't working, and if we can get more neighbors here, more mobility, get a park, I mean, it's just going to change. It's a game changer for this area. And I know we're going to action item tonight on the subcommittee. I'm going to say again, I would like those members of the board who currently live in Hillcrest to at least be given some kind of priority to be on the subcommittee. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it. All right, Mr. Brennan.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to thank Michael and planning department. You guys have put a lot of work into this, and it's really appreciated. All the data is a little bit head spinning, but really interesting to look at. I just want to reiterate, we have a hole in our bicycle connectivity from along University from about 5th westward into Mission Hills, where it gets into a really low stress street. I'd like to see that put on some sort of priority for bicycle connectivity. And to echo what Clint said about, let's really think about using trees as a method to creating some low stress mobility options around bike and ped and even automobile. So as a landscape architect, I'm always thinking about how do we make our communities a little greener. So that's my comment.
Great, thank you very much. Mr. Medeiros.
Yep, thank you. I concur with things said by Roy, Bill, Zach, Brayer. I agree with a lot of what's been said here tonight. The main takeaway I have of this, it's great work. It's first step. I saw a lot of the questions that came in started asking about, well, how does this compare with what we had? The answer is we don't know yet. And that's the whole purpose of this, in my mind, is, there are problems and we need to work on building those solutions to reshape what this is all going to look like 20 to 30 years down the road. This isn't something for tomorrow. I know we talked about where's funding coming from, things like that. A lot of this project is decades before we get there. So we have a long time before we truly have to worry about the long-term funding of this, but we really need to continue this focus on what is the future of Hillcrest going to look like and trying to set that plan in place. So again, I thank Michael and your team for all the work you're doing on this. Great step to move forward and to kind of launch from. And I look forward to seeing how this continues to progress. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Mr. Ellig.
Thank you, Michael. Always wonderful presentations. Have to have some time to let all those facts and figures, settle in. A couple points and then a question for you. One is I wanted to echo what Zach had said about the Normal Street Promenade. My personal opinion, and I will be advocating for, is the promenade going all the way up to Park Boulevard. I think it's an opportunity in many, many ways to, for the history, for open areas and things like that. I want to echo a little bit of what Clint sort of questioned about the capacity. And this gets into more of my question, I guess. If I recall your numbers, you said that there were 6,000 people in the plan area. That may be slightly questionable, given one of the comments, and 14,000 units. That being the case, what is the city looking for in the way of numbers? How there's going to be an increase. What goal is the city going to ask us to look at so we can start squeezing the toothpaste tube, if you will, to take from here and push from there? Because we only have 350, 380 acres, and when you average it out on an acre basis, this will have an impact. So thanks again, Michael. Excellent job as always.
Thank you. Ms. Hayes.
Thanks, Sohail. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I will be brief. And I just have a question for Michael. I also believe I put this in the survey, but have you thought about doing an affordable housing study to identify where the unsubsidized units are, where there might be pockets, and possibly to provide some benefits or incentives to retain them? I recognize there is some capacity that the city is trying to fulfill, but there's also a large concern for exacerbating the problem. So how is the city putting mechanisms in place to ensure that that doesn't happen?
Great, thank you very much. Mr. Daniel.
Thank you. Very comprehensive presentation, and I think an overall comment would be I look forward to seeing it on the website tomorrow so that we can go through it in more detail and understand it more clearly, and then have comments that we can either direct to Michael or through the subcommittee to Michael. Otherwise, it's a great concept. It has a lot of areas that need some massaging, and I think they know that. So let's get to it and start massaging.
Great, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Michael, would you like to comment on some of these questions?
Sure. So in terms of the looking at affordable housing, it's the way that we've been doing it with most of our plan updates and focused amendments and specific plans is to evaluate land use designation and mobility changes and zoning changes to address capacity and urban design. Affordable housing regulations are handled at the citywide level, and so at least from our perspective in the planning department is to not create sort of individual requirements for affordable housing that are unique to plan areas. It's to create a sort of a uniform citywide approach so that all areas are sort of treated equitably in terms of the provision of affordable housing and the requirements for projects to provide that housing. Regarding Bill's question related to a target or a number. So there's sort of a nuanced answer to this. The short answer is we don't have a specific number. We have identified sort of a preliminary analysis that we had to do for the grants that this is a grant funded effort through the state in which we identified a potential capacity increase of 10 to 15,000 units. But that was done sort of a very, very high level and preliminary analysis that was even sort of less refined than the presentation that I provided tonight in terms of looking at specific condominium sites, specific public spaces that wouldn't necessarily, publicly owned parcels that may not redevelop. So it was really just in the application and sort of in that initial review, what is that sort of overarching goal? It is not a prescription for the number of units. So if it ends up being less than that based on the dynamics that Bill and Clint and others have pointed out, and that were actually presented in the presentation as well in terms of lot sizes and parcels, then, we will present that, that information and make an approach that we think is going to best achieve our objectives and implement sort of the goals that we've identified. So sort of long-winded way of saying, we did put that in the grant, but it is not a hard and fast number that we are required to be adhered to. Thanks, Bill. I think there were, sorry, on the couple of the other things, I will mention that on urban design, wholeheartedly agree with Tom. I mean, I think that's one of the things that Diego sort of laid out, is in looking at the lot and block patterns, and sort of what happens in the eastern area is different from what's going to happen in the west, and then by the medical complex. So we really do want to spend the next couple of months and sort of into the fall evaluating sort of where those, paseos and connections can be located, where we can have plazas to really sort of address those connections. Fully understand the importance of emphasizing the Washington Normal and Park intersection. That's why we have these meetings. That's why we want to get your feedback, is to see sort of, not in addition to the existing conditions analysis, but also sort of what is the community saying as a priority, so that we can identify that. I know that there was other things Breer mentioned, inclusivity. That's obviously a key component that we will be addressing going forward in terms of equity and really sort of strengthening mode share to achieve our CAP goals. So I think we're in agreement on a lot of these areas, and we want to sort of further these goals. And then understanding that, there may be some disagreements on specific provisions, but ultimately what we want to do is create a better public space and a better community that thrives. In so much that we can do that through our planning process.
Are there any other questions that you had noted, or was that pretty much all of them?
I think that was it. I mean, in terms of, like I said, as we look at housing options and housing opportunities, we can look at potentially evaluating sort of what works and what doesn't. I know Amy had specifically asked about unsubsidized housing, and I don't really have a good answer in terms of what sort of analysis we may do on that. But it is something that we'll evaluate, and I can provide a response at a future meeting on that comment.
Great. Thank you very much.
I should say.
I have a question for Michael with respect to what's coming up next. Just the rules for if we have a subcommittee and versus a committee as a whole. So the key question is, it's my understanding that in a subcommittee, if more than half the people were to show up in person in the old way, people could stay and listen to what happened. They just couldn't participate. They couldn't make comments as to how they would want to vote on a particular issue. They couldn't be part of the discussion, but they had every right to observe and listen to what was going on. So I'm assuming that that would be the case if we have a subcommittee via Zoom. It's just a matter of a handful of people it could be that several board members could show up and listen, but they couldn't speak. But the reality is as long as no more than half the board members spoke on a particular issue, I believe we would be within the Brown Act. So I just wanted to get clarifications on that.
I would have to review that and follow up with you. To my knowledge, the provisions as it related to sort of subcommittee composition and participation have not changed with the change in the governor's orders and the temporary changes to Council Policy 624 with moving to Zoom meetings. So I'll start by sort of caveating and saying, I think you're correct. But I will certainly follow up and address that with the group, after the subcommittee is formed and before the next meeting, should that situation arise, and how that should be addressed. So that would be addressed at the subcommittee meeting. So.
Okay, very well. So let's move to subcommittee. How many members do you need from our board for the subcommittee?
So there's 17 board members as a total, I believe that's correct.
Yes.
So it would need to be less than 9. In order to prevent there being a majority of the board members. I mean, it's really up to the group. I know that last time we had 8, or in March or February, we had established 8 as sort of the number. And, I really think it's up to the group as a whole in terms of what that would be. I would just sort of, who has the time and wants to sort of participate and sort of get into, this was a fairly lengthy presentation. And I know we sort of threw a lot at everybody tonight, so I apologize for that. But it's also sort of the, you know, we are sort of on a fairly expedited timeline, and so we do want to address these in sort of fuller meetings that don't detract from, you know, the full planning group and other items on there. So I would say in the neighborhood of 5 to 8 would be ideal, and then obviously providing updates at the full planning group meeting.
And as chair, what I would request the members that are interested in becoming part of the subcommittee, I would really like to see people with specific technical backgrounds that can really benefit us as a whole, that, you know, have experience with urban planning, transit, you know, you name it. So that's going to be something that I'd like to see as far as who's comprising this subcommittee. But I would, you know, extend this out. Let's see, you know, who is interested right now is becoming a member of this subcommittee.
Well, I have a comment on our previous meeting, Sohail.
Yes, sir.
I think our goal is not to redo things we've decided. So I believe we had a tentative list that we came up with before. There was discussion about giving preference to Hillcrest residents. So I wrote down 5 of them that I remember. I remembered that there was some discussion about Roy Dahl being the chair, Gail, Amy, I believe, Tom Mulaney, Tim Gehagen. Those are the 5 I remember. So anyway, that's maybe a baseline that could be considered.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that note. I'd definitely like to see Clint Daniels on the subcommittee if he's got the time to participate. Potentially Michael Brennan if he has the time to participate. And then possibly even Brim Marsh or Mr. Smith. Both of you have some pretty nice backgrounds and knowledge that I think would be advantageous for the rest of the board. So I don't know what would that add up to with the inclusion of those names? Would that make it too many? Is that 9? I think.
I would also comment that Tim Gehagen has now missed 3 meetings in a row, which according to our bylaws would mean that he is eligible to be removed from our board as a whole.
Okay. We'll exclude Tim from this discussion for now. So let's keep the other 4 names that Tom had listed, and let's add 4 more to this list. So is anyone in opposition of my recommendations as far as additional board members for this subcommittee?
Okay, so Hale, this is Bill Ellig.
Yes, sir.
Comment sort of aside from that is this is a rather large focus plan area. And I tend to agree with Gail when she was saying about the inclusion of the Hillcrest people. Where my concern is more of the eastern part, the east of the 163. And I'm more than happy to allow others. I mean, if the subcommittee can be structured so that different areas are being considered, I think there's an opportunity to include more people, because I would definitely like to participate in the eastern section, whereas possibly not the rest of it as well. So a consideration, please.
I have a comment as well, Sohail, if that's okay.
I'm sorry, can you guys one at a time?
Can you hear me, Dennis Sason? Sohail, rather than you suggesting, should we not put it up to the members for volunteering?
Of course, I'm just making a suggestion, and then I will let these members that I'm dropping names to see if they're actually interested. And if they're not interested, then no big deal.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not volunteering myself, but rather than cite the ones that are preferred by the chair, I think it should be a neutral situation where anyone interested, including Bill Ellig, by the way.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Quick question.
This is Mr. Medeiros. Please go ahead.
Yes. I know we pushed this off last time because of the issues regarding finalizing a vote. So my question would be, and concern would be, I don't know everyone who's up. I haven't paid that close of attention, but this looks like it's a process that's going to span upwards of 18 to 24 months. So I would like to try to have consistency on this subcommittee if we can, and not be in a position where someone might not, if you're not running again, don't be on the subcommittee. If you are running, I don't know what we need to do there, but I think we need to be cognizant.
Thank you for that comment.
So Hill, this is
Yes,
Bob
sir.
Daniel. After this list that I read, maybe you could ask who else might be interested, but so far the names that have been mentioned are Roy Dahl, Gail Freed, Amy Haynes, Tom Mulaney, Bill Ellig, Clint Daniels, Mike Brennan, and Bill Smith.
That's
That
8.
comes to 8.
Right.
You left me out.
Yeah, Bram Marsh, and I was also on the original list.
Yeah, I'm interested, but I'm afraid I might not have the time. If there's a need for another member, I'll step up. But if Brian takes my place, I wouldn't see that as a problem.
Okay.
So Hill.
Yes, sir.
Chime in. I had expressed interest before. I think my time is becoming a bit more limited as well. I would, gladly step aside if I know Zach has expressed interest before in representing the Hillcrest area. So just for what it's worth.
Okay. All right. So Bob, remove Bill and Michael from that list. So now we're back to 6. Okay.
If I could get the names on that list, please. So I have Roy, Amy, Clint, Bob, Brer, Bill Ellig, and well, that's
No, let Bob read the names for you, please.
So I got slightly confused there, but did Roy say yes?
Yes, I'm very much willing.
Okay. Gail Freed?
Yes.
Amy Hayes?
Yes.
Tom Mulaney?
Yes.
Bill Ellig?
Yes.
Clint Daniels?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. And the other 2 were Mike Brennan and Bill Smith, both of whom have said that if necessary, they would step aside for somebody else. But we're still at 8 with that list.
Right. So
that's 6.
So that's 6. So let's remove Michael and Bill Smith from that list. So now we have Brer Marsh and who else?
I believe it was Matt Medeiros was on that potential list.
As well as Zach.
As well as Zach. Okay.
Also a Hillcrest resident.
Right. So we don't. I understand that we want to have Hillcrest residents on here, but I think at the same time we need some diversity on this subcommittee so that we can get as many positive comments and input and feedback to be as productive as possible with the city in this process. So of the Hillcrest residents, let's limit which one of you is going to be participating in this group. So Matt and Zach, like if it comes down to one or the other, maybe you guys can just, one of you can concede and let the other one be the subcommittee member.
Yeah. Is there anyone not running on the election?
That's probably me. I'm not planning to run on the next slate. However, I would point out that I'm not sure that you have anyone else that knows historical resources like I do, and I think that that would be an imperative thing to have included.
I agree with Amy.
And so Hale, this is Ellig again, and
Yes.
if you want to have someone else from Hillcrest, like I said, that's going to be the core of the development, and I think a lot of the discussion. So I'm willing to pull back on that and maybe step forward only when the eastern portions come up. So if someone's willing to go along
let me ask that question of Michael. Michael, is it possible to kind of rotate board members so long as there's no more than 8 at these subcommittee meetings?
If you have it as an ad hoc subcommittee, I think you can do that. Where you kind of run into issues is sort of ensuring that you have a quorum, and if there are some people who do want to show up. So the only thing I would say is that it is easier when we have sort of a set list, and that all of this information will be made available public. And knowing Bill Ellig and Matt and Zach, like, they're not going to, whether or not they are or not on the group, they will have the ability to comment and weigh in, and all their, they know where to find me too, and find us. So.
Okay.
One thing we could do is take a core of 6 for the actual committee, and that leaves 2 spots open on any one meeting for others to join in.
Is that doable, Michael?
Again, I mean, I think, it's sort of, that could be another thing too, is you could potentially identify some backups. You have the core of 6, and then sort of, rotating thing. I just think my only concern there is just you run into potential coordination issues. So, and the potential of a quorum. So I would recommend against that. I would just sort of have a set number, whether it's 6 or 8. And then again, as long as you don't have a quorum who is actively participating in the subcommittee, it'll work out. It'll make things sort of less complicated in the process. So.
Okay.
So Hale,
Yes,
Zelig again. That said, I feel it's probably better for me to pull back and offer my observations and feedback, as Michael is well aware. On the side, that way I think it'd be better for everybody.
Okay, very good. Okay, Mr. Daniel, let's go back to that list of names that we've got. So, Mr.
I just put it on the chat.
Okay, so let me see. We've got Roy, Gail, Amy, Tom, Clint, Breer, Matt, and Zach. That's 8. So there are your 8 proposed subcommittee members. Can I get a motion from my board?
I'll make the motion to adopt the subcommittee.
Can I get a second?
I'll second it.
I second.
All right. Can I get a vote?
I'm sorry, who made the motion and who was the second?
Motion was made by Roy. Second was made by Bob Daniel. And let me get a vote, please. Just raise your hands on the screen so I can see your hands in favor of this list. Let me just hold them up until I say, wonderful. You guys all look great. All right. Thank you. Anyone in opposition of this list?
We have a request for public comment there. I think
We've already had public comment on this item.
Yeah, we had public comment.
There's no public comment on this. Further public comment, that is. Okay, very good. So, Michael, you have your list of subcommittee members.
I do. Thank you all very much. Really appreciate it.
No abstentions? No.
Do we have a chair?
The chair that I had appointed from last time was Roy Dahl. If anyone is against that, please let me know, but I think you would make a great chair.
I'm still willing to do that. Thanks.
Yes, everybody good with that? All right, wonderful.
Great. Thank you all. Thank you, Roy, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Michael.
All right, let us move down this list to action item 3. This is pertaining to our current representative for the Airport Noise Authority Committee. Chris Cole has volunteered his time in the past for this position and is willing to continue with this volunteering position unless there's any board member that is interested who would like to take over this position. Feel free to let me know now. Otherwise, if everybody is okay with Chris continuing in this role, I would like to receive a motion from the board.
I'll make a motion. This is Clint.
Second, Zach.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
And we do have public comment on this.
No, okay. Before you make a comment, Breer, let's go to the public comment.
And that is Matt Wallstrom. Well, just one moment, Matt.
Well, now the vote's been held, and so my public comment isn't going to make any difference. Again, this is what I'm saying when I mentioned the comments earlier on item number 2. This format is inimical to the Brown Act and the.
Mr. Wallstrom, we're on item number 3. I don't know why you're coming on item number 2.
Because you already considered item number 4.
We're on item number 3.
I know. Okay.
Oh, and Matt, you already had a public comment on number 2, which was the Focused Plan Amendment. So you did speak during that time, and that is action item number 2.
Yeah, so we're on action item number 3, Matt. Did you have a comment on Chris Cole's appointment as our...
Matt did on number 4. That was a mistake on my end.
Are you there, Matt? Oh, he's muted. Okay. Is there any public comment on action item number 3? No. Okay, I guess there's no comments on this. Board comments. Breer, you had a comment.
Yes, I'm sorry I didn't look this up beforehand, but I'm wondering if there's our bylaws allow non-board members to be representative to the Airport Noise Committee. I know that Bobo, the BPC requires a board member to be the representative.
Michael, are you aware of any rules against non-board members being representatives?
Representatives to the...
To other organizations such as this Airport Authority Committee for Noise.
It's not common, but I'd have to look at the bylaw specifically to see if there was any explicit provisions that would prevent that.
Chris Cole has his hand up if we want to allow him to talk. Chris Cole is our representative.
Sure, please.
Chris, you should be able to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. I'd like to say that Bob Daniels' kitchen looks very much like mine. I don't know who did it for you. It's been a pleasure to serve on represent you guys, and I've been doing it for quite a while. And there have been other board representatives that you had who were not on the board for other groups. I don't know what the bylaws state, however, but I'm more than pleased to continue if that pleases you.
Very well. Thank you.
It's just a question.
Okay, so we can verify, but in the meantime, we can also make a motion and then put a footnote just to verify that it's okay to have a non-board member representing us.
So Hill, this is Bob.
Yes, sir.
I clearly recall that this was addressed some time ago, I think by another chair, and it was okay to have a non-board member represent the airport noise, represent us at the Airport Noise Committee.
Great, thank you for that clarification. Any other board comments? No. Can I get a motion, please?
Clint already moved and I seconded.
Okay, all in favor of Chris Cole continuing his role as our representative?
Aye.
Let me go through the screens. Great. All right. Any in opposition? No. Any abstentions? No abstentions. All right. Wonderful. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate you continue your volunteering position. All right. Let's move to the next action item. This is for subcommittee member appointment. City Planning Commission is establishing subcommittees to review the Parks Plan and Housing Mobility Proposal. Clint Daniels has indicated an interest in becoming a member of the Housing Mobility Subcommittee. He also nominated Breer Marsh to serve on the Parks Plan Committee as he is our representative to the Balboa Park Commission. Let's discuss these two potential candidates and come up with our recommendations as far as who we would like to represent us. Clint, would you like to make any comments on this?
Yeah, so I would just say this is the community planning groups, the chairs of the chairs group that meets once a month that brings together all the community planning groups across the city. They're currently reviewing the plan that Councilmember Ward mentioned earlier, and I'm going to get the name wrong right off the top of my head. Michael, feel free to jump in. The complete cities or complete
communities.
Complete communities program, and reviewing that, and reviewing the housing, the mobility, and the parks component of that to eventually make a recommendation to the larger CPP group. And I'm obviously very interested in the housing and mobility issues in the city as well as in Uptown. And so I have an interest in serving on that as representative of this group. And while I was reviewing that, I just thought that since Brer has shown interest in parks and is our representative on the Boulevard Park Commission, he'd be a nice fit for representing us on the discussion of parks in this subcommittee group.
Great. Thank you for sharing that information. Zach, do we have any public comment on this?
We do. We have Matt Wallstrom. One moment.
I just wanted to confirm that there were not going to be any board member or non-board members on the subcommittees.
For CPG. Is that correct? For CPG? Okay.
Correct.
Right. Yeah. So this is for existing board members as becoming members of CPG. So this is not promoting any non-board members. All right, thank you. Any other public comment? Zach?
No further comment.
No further comment. All right, any board comments on these recommendations?
I have one.
Okay, Tom, please.
Yeah. Sohail, I think that I think you probably need to an alternate CPCs. I remember as an alternate. I thought I was an alternate, and maybe not, but I think we discussed before. I think you can have two alternates. So maybe you want to make Clint and Brer your two alternates in your place.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other board comments?
Oh, Hale, this is Zelig.
Yes,
one thing you might want to do also is include as part of your general format for future meetings is having each of these people, if there has been a meeting, give a quick update. So just have as a matter of course. So yeah.
Of course. And that goes for any of the other groups too. So if Greer goes to the Balboa Park Commission, if Mr. Cole has anything to present on the airport authority, we would have them bring those notes before us. Any other board comments? No. Okay. Can I get a motion on these recommendations for the CPG subcommittees?
So moved.
So is Matt, is your motion with Clint and Brer being included as the alternate to the CPG?
Yes, if someone wants to pull that apart into two separate, I'm willing to do it, but I think it's cleaner if we can just put it forward as a single vote.
Okay.
I'll second.
Second. All right. All in favor? All right. Any opposition? No opposition. And any abstentions? No abstentions. Great. Thank you. Appreciate that. And let's move on to our last action item. This is for a proposed stop sign installation at Curlew Street and Otsego. We have a presenter here, Mr. Greg Hearn. Zach, do you see Greg there on the list?
I made him a participant, so Greg should be able to.
Hi, Greg's here.
All right, there you go, Greg. Greg, please go ahead and give us a presentation on this action item.
Sure thing. And thanks everyone for your time. I'll start off by just commenting that this location of Curlew Street, it basically goes from the Robinson Street bend all the way down to Raynard Way. Speeding, inattentive drivers, drunk drivers have been a significant problem for a long time. People use, it's a small, narrow residential street. At the top where it bends from Robinson, the posted speed limit is 15 miles an hour. The remaining section of Curlew is posted at 25. It's not unusual to see cars and motorcycles speeding up and down the hill in excess of 50, 60 miles an hour. And, you know, so the neighbors, myself included, have been working with the city for quite some time to get some, you know, some infrastructure in place to try to get that under control, especially because the problem is worsening with, you know, new development in Little Italy, downtown, and in Hillcrest as well. More and more cars are using this as a cut through versus the freeways and larger expressways that are available, which is fine, except for the fact that you know, it is a residential street, and there's plenty of children on the street, pets, wildlife. You know, skunks get killed all the time. Our cat was killed a few weeks ago by a speeder who didn't even stop. We have a 3-year-old child in the house, and you know, it could have just as easily been her just, you know, wandering out into the street. So I had a meeting on June 25th, a site meeting with Gary Pence and Carmen Tofik from Traffic Engineering, Ty Birch from Councilmember Ward's office, as well as David Cerullo from SDPD. And you know, we walked the street up and down, talked about potential solutions. Oh, and I might add also that prior to that, we circulated a petition amongst neighbors. We got over 300 signatures. There's a lot of demand for some speed calming and also traffic safety measures in place in the section of Curlew before, you know, a child or a person is killed. The 3 immediate suggestions that all members came away from that meeting were 2 actions that Gary Pence, as the head of traffic engineering, could take. One was installing some speed regulator signs that, you know, tell you how fast you're going, which can be useful, but it doesn't necessarily you know, have a pronounced effect insofar as people can just ignore the signs. The other was some parking lane lines. So Gary's going to proceed with those 2 items, but the third that everyone agreed on was we really need additional control at the intersection of Otsego and Curlew. Otsego is a small residential cul-de-sac that goes up the hill from Curlew Street. But the problem is that the entry point where it intersects with Curlew is right at an area where Curlew Street bends. And so what we've seen, and you know, many, especially residents on Otsego, I personally live on Curlew near that intersection, have a lot of difficulty getting in and out of the street, because with cars going at excessive speed, which they often do, you just don't have the visibility to safely turn onto or off of Otsego Street. So all agreed that the best solution for that particular intersection, in conjunction with some other, you know, traffic calming measures, would be an always stop. Currently, there's a stop sign at Otsego, you know, leading where it intersects with Curlew, but there's no stop on either direction of Curlew leading up to Otsego. So basically, the process, as I understand it, given that it is a relatively small street, that, you know, Gary Pence indicated that we would need the approval of the Uptown Planners to then write a memo, take that to Mayor Falconer's office. We have been in contact with the mayor's office. McConna Rowan, I believe, you know, had indicated that he would be more than happy to be our point of contact there. But again, this whole effort needed to originate with the community, which we had a lot of support from the neighbors, from traffic engineering, which we have Gary and Carmen's support. Councilmember Ward's office supports it, Ty Birch, and SDPD as well. So that's pretty much it. If anyone has any questions or
Very well. Thank you, Greg. I appreciate it.
You bet.
Zach, do we have any public comment on this?
No public.
No
Oh, let's see. This is item number 4.
This is item number 5.
This is item number 5. Oh, yes. No public comment.
No public comment, great. Do we have any board comments on this?
I would like to comment. So I live over on Dove, right off of Curlew, so I know the area well. I would just say, because there's that hill there, and especially because bicyclists and people who are used to going down that street, are used to going down that hill very fast. I agree with the need for the all-way stop, but I think there also may be a need coming down the hill for a sign that kind of warns of the stop there, especially because it's downhill. I don't know that regardless of if bikers are going to stop, but I just think that may need to be addressed.
Thank you for the comment. Any other board comments? Mr. Ellie.
Thanks, Sohail. I'm sure the numbers on the street don't warrant an automatic stop sign. I'm sure they've already gone through that. We in University Heights have some similar issues as well. And I hope that by putting a stop sign there, I'm familiar with the location. It will help solve the situation. And I firmly support it. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Any other board comments? No? Okay.
Motion to approve.
Second? We got Mr. Ellie as a second. All right, all in favor to approve this proposed stop sign installation? Raise your hand.
I got out of the meeting, but yes, we are approving. Was there any sort of amendment to it, or was it just as is?
No, as is. Okay.
Okay.
Anyone in opposition to this stop sign installation? No. Any abstentions? No. Very well. Thank you, Greg.
Who made the motion there and who seconded?
It was Roy. I make the motion.
Roy made the motion and Mr. Ellie made. Thank you very much, Greg. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
All right. We have an information item and we have a presenter, Ms. Farah Mahzari. This is for the Scripps Mercy San Diego project. Is Ms. Mahzari here? Michael?
Just one moment.
Yeah, I still see her here.
Yep. Yep.
All right.
Can
I asked.
Yeah, can you are you able to share your screen? Or do
Hi,
I need to?
This is Farah, but I'm not the
We also
presenter.
need
I'm
Monica.
here. Monica is the presenter.
Yes. Looking for Monica here. Not seeing Monica in the attendee room. Just one moment.
Yeah, I don't see her in her either.
Well, should we give her a minute?
Farah, do you want to give her a call?
Yeah, Monica Montana. Do you not see her?
Yeah, no, I'm not seeing her in the waiting room. I did see her earlier, but I'm not seeing her name now. So if you want to give her a call and see, maybe she's having technical issues right now. We'll hold on for a couple minutes here.
It says she's logging back now.
Yeah, she's
Okay.
her computer kicked her out, so she's logging back on.
All right, I see her.
Okay.
Hi,
Hi.
can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Ken.
Okay, I
Hi,
am so
Monica.
sorry about that.
First screen.
I've been on the whole time and right before the other item you finished voting, my computer froze and it
Don't
kicked
worry
me
about
out.
it. Don't worry about it. Do you have your screen to share a presentation with us?
You know, I was gonna ask Robin, by any chance, can you bring it up? Because I'm on the phone now, because my computer, I still can't get it to work. The one where I have the presentation. Do you happen to have
Just
it
added
readily
Robin as
available?
a panelist.
Yes, give me a minute.
Okay, thank you.
Someone needs to mute their screen, please.
Sorry for the technical difficulties. Everything was working fine throughout the entire meeting.
Okay, if you can share my screen, it's up. Robin Medapper.
Robin Medapper, all right. Michael, can you help her out?
Yeah, I'm gonna,
Robin, I think you have the option at the bottom there, or maybe we have to give you that ability.
there we go. I think I gave that to her. Try now, Robin.
Okay, give me a second.
Oh no, sorry. Sorry for the technical difficulties, people. Here we go, Robin, now try.
Okay, share screen. Share.
Oh, perfect, it's coming.
Here we go.
And from the beginning.
So, Monica, how much time are you going to need for this presentation?
10 minutes probably at most, and then it'll depend on questions. But for us, only about 6 minutes.
So this is,
so we allotted about 10.
This is an informational item, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
and
this is correct.
at some point, I'm assuming your project's going to come back before us, or can you clarify?
Oh, yes, and probably a couple of times. I mean, we would imagine with the size of this type of project that we would be coming back with regular updates.
So maybe we limit the Q&A for this evening, but let's start with the presentation as an informational item.
Okay, well, thank you so much for having us and for holding on till the very end. We'll try to make this very quickly. Robin, if you could go to the next slide. As you know, with due to seismic requirements and also to the changes in healthcare, even more so within the last couple of months, we are due to upgrade our hospitals. Most of the hospitals in San Diego have needed to go through some sort of upgrade. As you've heard, UCSD is also very involved in upgrading their campus. And we are as well for our Scripps Mercy Hospital San Diego, which is located in Hillcrest. This is an aerial of Scripps Mercy Hospital San Diego as it is right now. And this next slide, I'm sorry, go ahead to the next one. This next slide shows the changes that we are proposing for the hospital in the rebuilding of this campus. This is a very high-level introduction towards the master plan project that we have right now. We are in the very early stages of this process. It has gone through about a 2-year internal planning process. And we got it ready to be able to submit it, and we submitted the application in February. With COVID-19 and everything getting delayed, offices closing and such, we finally received comments in June. So it'll be our intention again to visit several times with Uptown Planners throughout the course of the review process and to be able to share more specifically all the aspects of the plan. In the
Monica,
next, yes.
can I just point out on this slide, everything that you see in the shaded area is to be demolished. So what you see before you is the existing, and what is shaded is to be demolished.
So this slide just gives a general view of the changes that we have planned. And that is an aerial with, again, with those same shaded areas, but as it looks in a more real-time type of layout. So again, that's Robin McGaffer, who's also on the line with us. And we are both here to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Yeah, thank you for that. Zach, do we have any public comments on this information item? No? I can't hear you.
No public comment.
No. Any quick board comments on this information item?
I just have two quick questions.
Yes,
your estimated time frame, probably not good at this point.
Well, it's by 2030 is when we are to have the hospital completely up to the seismic standards. That's when they kick in. Again, with COVID, of course, planning has gotten a little behind, but for now we are still shooting at that deadline. You know, it's a little difficult to say, not knowing what the future months and maybe the future year holds for us due to the virus. But that was before COVID. I could say that that was our estimated to have it well before 2030.
Thank you.
That was it.
What is the MOB1?
Medical office building.
So we're going to lose that park area that you often get cited for. So some of the other areas around there are going to become park-like?
This is Robin. The entry pavilion and the area that will be the new main entrance to the new hospital is very much akin to what you see where the MOB1 is planned.
Good. Amy, I think you had a comment.
Yes. So I understand that there's a lot that goes into hospital campus planning, and with COVID that introduces new things. One of the things that I'm kind of disappointed about is it appears like you are aiming to demolish 550 Washington Street, which is a really iconic mid-century architect design building. So I'm just wondering if you can speak to that specifically, and if you have gone through assessments in terms of how to keep it. It seems that you have an entry pavilion tentatively in that same spot. So are there some kind of adaptive reuse models or something that maybe out of the box that we can think about now that could help keep that iconic structure? It does have a pavilion underneath that has a lot of infill right now. So I'm just wondering if you have thought through all of the options in terms of that resource specifically. Thank you.
I'll take that, Monica. Thanks, Amy, for your comments. I've anticipated those. Bruce Coons and I have had several discussions about this particular building and the interest in it. The efficiencies of a modern day medical facility make it very difficult to adapt that building. So we are proposing to demolish it. We have prepared a historic resources report, very extensive, very thick with all kinds of backup, and that was submitted to the city just, I want to say 2 weeks ago. I don't think the city has gotten to it yet, but we anticipate that will be a full part of this evaluation. We are planning to do a full environmental impact report. You'll be hearing probably next from us with a notice of preparation and scheduling a scoping meeting to discuss those types of things, including historic resources. And we welcome that discussion. But that is one of the issues that we've identified is going to be one that we'll need to work through. So I appreciate your comments, and we look forward to working with you.
Any other comments, Amy?
No, that's okay. Thanks, Robin. I appreciate the explanation.
Sure.
Any other board comments?
I would like to wish Miss Monica Montano a happy birthday.
Yay.
Thank you, Zach.
I have a comment, Sohail.
Yes, please.
I noticed that you have there's a new parking structure on the east side opposite the 163. Can you talk about access and capacity and height of that, please?
Sure. So that parking structure has already been approved as in substantial conformance with the existing approvals. And we came and presented that to Uptown Planners, gosh, I want to say a year or so ago. And that's the first phase. We need that parking structure to be able to actually, start construction upon approval of the master plan. So that's the kickoff phase, is that parking structure. The height, I don't know off the top of my head. It's kind of sunk in and surrounded by a big hill. So the elevation from between 8th Avenue and 6th Avenue is significant. I don't know what it is, but that parking structure will be tucked into the hill. There will be ingress and egress from 6th Avenue as well as from 8th. I believe, and Farah, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the stories is 8 stories. But again, the elevation between 6th Avenue and 8th puts the top level at grade level at 8th.
Okay. Any other board comments?
So, Hill, one question that I would have is, could you give us an idea as to how many square feet the current facility has and how many square feet the new facility will have?
I cannot, I don't have those kinds of details at this point, and I don't want to mislead anybody. I will say that hospitals are unique when it comes to measuring impacts such as traffic. Hospitals themselves are based on the number of beds, and we are not planning to have a net increase in the total number of beds at full build out. However, the medical office buildings 1 and 2 that you'll see on the west side, those are measured in terms of square footage. And we will certainly have more details on those sorts of things when we come back next time, as will be in the notice of preparation and the scoping meeting, which we're working on right now.
Okay. Any other board members?
Yeah, I had one quick question, and it might be to other board members. I recall that we had a presenter not too long ago that was trying to build a residential structure just to the south of where this parking structure is going. Does anyone else have that?
Yeah, it was a big development. It was what, 300, 400 units?
Yeah, so I'm just curious if the projects are aware of one another as far as, now with people going up that same street for parking as the residentials, this is becoming a more and more of a of a traffic congestion area. So I just want to kind of point that out.
I can answer that question. We have had several discussions with them. We've shared plans with each other, even dating back to last year before we submitted. We haven't heard it. I believe it's SRM Development that is proposing that. And I think it's a senior housing type project. We have not heard from them since we submitted. I don't know what their situation is in light of the world circumstances over the last 6 months, but it is, we will continue to endeavor to coordinate with them as best as possible. And that's what we had been doing, like I said, last year before we submitted.
Okay,
so we'll continue that.
Just want to double check.
Great.
Thank you.
Any other board members? No. Okay. Appreciate your time. Thank you for hanging in with us and providing this information.
Thank you, and we'll see you soon.
Yes, thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I believe that concludes our meeting for this evening.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. All right, I appreciate it, everyone. I'll let you know if we have anything for next month.
Thank you to the 39, 38 folks out there who stuck with us.
Thank you.
Nice work, Zach. Keeping all the votes. Good job.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Bye.
Thank you.
Michael Prince, if you could stay on.
No.
You're off at night, just for a moment.
Sure.
Thanks.
Michael, I assume you'll be contacting me about setting up the next meeting for the
Yep.
subcommittee.
Yeah, absolutely. Same as before, Roy. Look forward to working with you, and yeah, we can definitely follow up. Probably sometime next week. So.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Just wanted to see if you happen to figure out how to get the attendees.
No, I think the recording is saved, so I'm wondering if there's something in there.
Included in it.
And I tried to ask one of my coworkers who is like good on the Zoom thing, and she couldn't figure it out either. So let me.
Okay. There's
So
an
let's see,
area.
meeting.
Participants. Now they're gone. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything.
Yeah.
It's just part of the challenges that we're facing right now.
Yep.
I guess maybe the elections committee will have to deal with that when it comes to it.
Yeah, I would just say,
maybe I'm just thinking for future meetings what we should do. It could be just this webinar format that's different because Clint was able to
pull it down from
the
meeting.
Before, but if we can't access it, it'll be fine. Just wanted to. Thank you for all you do, Michael.
Thanks, Zach.
Have
Appreciate
a
it.
glass of wine, a beer. You deserve rest.
Little late for alcohol tonight. I gotta. Yeah, it's all good, but it was good. I did not expect Emmanuel to go be quite so methodical. I thought he was going to breeze through his slides, but yeah,
it's quite all right. It was a good presentation. I got a lot out of it.
Yeah.
And I think for the future meetings, I got to get someone to do technical stuff on top.
Yeah. We
can too much, but
we can coordinate. We can coordinate on that as well, especially when it's related to Hillcrest stuff. I can get Shannon involved and sort of have her do some of that stuff.
Great, perfect. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Yeah, same to you, Zach. Cheers. Appreciate it.